Hello, you are very welcome to the Overlap Rugby podcast. I'm Shane, that's Daragh.
Hello.
And this is episode 100.
Hey!
Yeah, we made it. We made it to the century.
Didn't not think, bad.
No, it's not bad so far, you know. And it's a doozy of a show we have in store for you as well. As you can tell, we're going to be focusing on the Lions as Test 1 is looming very close now. So we're going to get started by kind of looking back on their most recent club game last week, as well as all the updates from their camp and from the Springboks camp, all the news. And then we're going to dive into that preview and get into the meat of Test 1 and how we think it's going to go. Very interesting. We have the teams because we are a little late coming up, but we're going to get right into that. But that's not going to be it either, because we do have a lot of summer internationals to wrap up as well, so we're going to look back on some of those games too.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, the main of it, like last week, was a show that had, some Lions intrigue, but lots of other juicy test matches to get into. We'll look back on some, but really, where last week was about all these games, this week is about 80 minutes, and that will certainly be the bulk of the show. But no, there were games to look back on. The All Blacks finished out their series with Fiji with another dominant win. See how they're looking heading into the Rugby Championship. We'll touch base on them. We'll talk about Wales Argentina. What a brilliant performance that was from the Pumas. Truly. Putting Wales to the sword in the Millennium Stadium. And we'll also look back on the classic that was the Australia-France series. Another brilliant game, a third very tight game that was not decided by 2 points. It was decided by 3. Another brilliant game and a well-won win by the Wallabies. So we'll touch on that. Samoa Tonga finished out their World Cup qualifier, and Samoa made it to the World Cup, and congratulations to them. We'll touch on that game. We'll touch on Rugby Europe, where Portugal had a great win over Russia and put themselves in pole position to go on and qualify for the World Cup as the second European qualifier. So we'll touch on all of that, as well as the Rugby World Cup qualifiers in Africa as well, and there were also qualifiers in South America where Uruguay were pushed all the way.
We're going to check out all of that, and then once international rugby's wrapped up there, we're going to pivot into the club rugby, because there is the MLR finals. We finally have the final 4 officially, and we will look ahead to those games that are coming up this week. We'll also make a brief mention of the Currie Cup before moving on to the Olympics, where the Sevens are going to be in action next week as well, and we have our own intrigue there. Ireland did manage to make it in as the last team in the door in the men's
12 teams.
12 teams in both the men's and the women's, and it's over 3 days each. It'll be done in a week, so that's coming up next week. So we're going to do a little preview of that before we wrap up the show with the rugby news of the week, as we always do.
Absolutely. And listen, before we start, as it is the 100th episode, I just want to say a big thank you for everyone who helped us along the way. All those loyal commenters and subscribers and even casual viewers. It's been great having you along. It's been a lot of fun from our end sharing rugby. Started when we just out of the blue just decided to do this because we chatted about rugby so much, and I feel like we've actually learned a lot about the game over the course of doing it. So thank you for all you guys who got out with the journey, got along with us on the journey. I would say a special thanks to Don from Unbiased Rugby. He was one of the early followers, and Star Leo as well. I give the shout out to and what a trooper of a commentator he is as well.
Absolutely. We appreciate you all, dude. I'm just gonna ditto that as well, because it's been a hell of a long time coming now, this 100th episode, and it's been great fun, and we definitely have learned a fair bit just looking back on some earlier episodes that are all still up there. It's a big old busy channel now, but it's some of the haircuts and some of the dubious notions that we've gone through. So we've arrived here now at episode 100, and we're glad for it, and we're glad for all of you. So thanks for coming along. But we're also going to add a caveat to that and say sorry again for the late upload, because it is becoming a content dump Friday tradition that we are doing now. But as I said, the upside is that we do have all the teams for the upcoming weekend, so we can ideally be a little more concise, perhaps.
We'll see about that. Absolutely. And a big few weeks coming up too. We've obviously got Test 2 to look ahead to next week, as well as back at Test 1. That'll be very interesting to see what's going on in the Lions tour. And then the following week, I believe, clashes with Bledisloe. Bledisloe won. Jeez, the season just comes quickly. The Rugby Championship is on its way. I believe the Springboks have 5 straight weekends of fixtures, which no one's considering, because they have to go and play Argentina the weeks after the series. So we'll have all that content coming to you over the coming weeks as well.
Episodes 102 and beyond, We're going to keep going. We're going to keep going because the rugby doesn't stop. So with all that said, I suppose, thanks again. Let's keep that drive for 2k subs going by, if you haven't already, clicking that subscribe, like, share, share, comment, all of this stuff that we love you doing. Yeah, please do. It does help the channel a lot.
Absolutely. But listen, without any more of that nonsense, we're going to
adieu, as we call it.
Yeah, yes. We're going to move on and look back, starting just with the Lions game that took place last weekend, where they put up a 49-3 point win against a Stormers side whose whole hustle was trying and failing to keep the score down for the whole game.
They did. They succeeded for the first 30. The first 30 minutes were depressing. And even looking on the highlights to rewatch it, and then it's like, oh, the first highlight comes at like 32 minutes. You're like, oh yeah, the first half hour was really bad. It was bad from both teams, but the Stormers were kind of willing it to be bad more.
They were in the game more than they suspected they might have been, I think. But their whole hustle seemed to be, they're not going to put 50 on us.
No.
And to be fair,
they had a lot of possession and they couldn't really use it at all. Not even the same way.
They didn't try in times. They'd turn the ball over and just kick it. It was an amusing watch. There wasn't too much to learn from it. It was very, very strong showing from Cowan Dickey, who
has forced his way up through it.
As it turns out, may well have forced his way in just everywhere at the breakdown. I thought Ty Byrne was brilliant. Adam Beard, Marcus Smith. What a first game! He kind of took his time, grew into it, and then he was confident by the end. Yeah, he was just had the hustle, had the measure of that Stormers defense. He was like, they're slow.
There was very little pressure defense coming. That was what's vexing from a Lions point of view, is that it wasn't really adequate prep for what's coming next. But in other senses, it was good for guys to get a run out. You mentioned Adam Beard. I was delighted. His 2-touch try that he got, he managed to get a lovely pass out wide, and then he was there on the next phase to dot it down. That's just good hustle in the wide channels. Likewise, Conan had another similar, got involved in the play in the middle third, got his hands free, got an offload going, and then was there to storm through later and grab his try well. So like little positive moments. Louis Rees-Sammet's try was probably the highlight of the game, to be honest. You had Garrett Davis, quick tap under his own sticks out to Marcus Smith, little goose step, little magic, find Louis Rees-Sammet and just streak up the right hand side. So all of that, it was positive, but those were little flashes.
Yeah, and Alan Wynne-Jones coming in and just enjoying
sticking
the freedom
a load of
Cape Town.
It was great to see him in basketball humour. Notably, there were no massive shots either given or taken by Alan Wynne-Jones. There weren't many massive shots in the game anyway, but he came on for, I think it was 23 minutes, which is good, and an amazing recovery. But I was just looking to see if anyone was going to put a shot in or if he was going to drop a shoulder in, and it didn't really happen.
You'd think in seasons gone by that would have been the only mission of the club side a week out from the series.
Yes, put a shot in.
Yeah, exactly. But no, the Stormers were very much a level below, but it was a good win for the Lions, but not too much to be gained from it, I don't think, and probably not worth lingering on.
No.
There was also just as far as the overall tour, there's been a bit of Lions news. There's been a ding dong battle between Gatland and Razzie Erasmus, a war of words over high shots. It's been amusing, and then Nienaber moving his team selection a week forward, and Gatland following him then and doing that, but getting his team leaked. It seems like there's some weird little psychological wars going on between the coaches.
I find it funny because Gatland does like to get an edge in media kind of week. He is one who plays that game, certainly in Six Nations, but I don't know if he's going to win it against Razzie in South Africa. I really don't. And it was, what was he tweeting as a shot like that Owen Farrell put in the South Africa A game that was a classic shoulder to head that was just went unnoticed, and that was what he did. And then the response was, it's disappointing to see him resort to Twitter. And it's like,
resort to Twitter. You lodged a complaint trying to get Faf out of the test series.
You did. That's resorting to some stuff as well. That's shenanigans. There's all kinds of behind the scenes shenanigans going on. But generally, in more positive news, the Lions got all but one got a clean bill of health in terms of the squad. I know Finn Russell is still not available currently, but the rest of the squad were given a clean tick from the medical staff, including Alan Wynne-Jones. So that's very positive to go into test week 1 with. And then likewise there were all kinds of COVID concerns for the Springboks, hence the South Africa A game, but a fair few of their charges, in fact almost all of their key men, seem to have returned unscathed from that. We're going to get into that
apart from
Big Dwayne, but I think that's an injury. He's cited as an injury rather than COVID, so he's a notable absentee, but I think they've got over other more pressing things like COVID in the camp seem to have been kind of allayed in advance of the business end of the season, really, because that's what it is about. It's been about this Lions tour. It's been about getting this test series, getting as far as it. The other news about getting this test series done, it was like 2 weeks in the kind of pipeline or kind of rumbling behind the scenes, but they have finally announced that it is going to be staying in Cape Town. It's not going to be moving to Johannesburg at any point, as was going to be the plan for tests 2 and 3. But like, it was up in the air, but people kind of figured that was what was going to happen. But it has now officially been announced, so they're going to lay roots in Cape Town and get used to kind of no altitude and just kind of play a test series down here.
Absolutely. And so listen, without much more ado on all the pre-Lions news, we have now arrived at the main show.
Yes,
it is Test 1 time. I think this has been the most anticipated game now ever since the pandemic struck, since the World Cup.
Yes,
everyone has been looking forward to this series. People were wondering whether it should happen or would happen. People have been calling for it not to happen. But I think in the end, we're all kind of delighted now that this game is going ahead.
True.
And it is just a massive there's a massive amount of intrigue here. So it's going to be, as you say, in Cape Town Stadium. Obviously there's no Newlands anymore.
No.
That's Saturday 7 o'clock English and Irish time. But 8 o'clock local time, I would assume.
That's right.
And that's to be refereed by Nick Berry of Australia, Ben O'Keefe of New Zealand, and Reynal of France on the sidelines, and Brendan Pickerel of New Zealand in the TMO box.
Yeah, and that's the same official. Those officials are going to take all 3 tests, but they're going to rotate their refereeing roles. So they have an Australian for test 1, a New Zealander for test 2, and a Frenchman for test 3 is going to be the dynamic. So we are with the Australian, Nick Berry with the man is the man with the whistle for test 1, and it's going to be interesting that way. I know Gatland was having a meeting with the officials, all the officials, for in advance of the test. I think that was on Thursday, or sorry, I think it was actually Wednesday that he was going to be meeting with them, but to discuss, because they've obviously had a bit more kind of localised refs by necessity because COVID. They had a few SAFAs reffing games. They had Wayne Barnes, so they just wanted to discuss kind of whether there would be, I guess, continuity of decision making from those kind of showings to what to expect in the test series. So there's just some clarity on that. It is a factor. It is obviously important if you can get an edge, but also just get an inkling into what the ref wants. So clear communication from all the refs is really what we're hoping for as fans. Just if both teams can get on the same page with the refs, then we can just have clean games and not be worried about the man with the whistle. And
that's the hope. But he is always a factor. And so this is the one, isn't it? Can the Springboks take this first test? There is a bit of, there is a dynamic where, the Lions at the end of a long season, often it's said that winning the first test is crucial in these tours. That very often if you don't win the first test, winning 2 in a row at the back end of a season against a gelling home side is too tough a task. And likewise for the Springboks, I think a great opportunity to put the Lions under massive pressure. For some reason I think that if the Springboks lose the first test, they're probably in better stead overall. For some reason I just think that maybe that's nonsense. I definitely think it's a huge advantage, the team that wins, obviously massively so as far as taking home the series. But it feels like a loss in this first test would be a rough one.
Well, it would be rough for both, but you're saying that the Springboks are better prepared to cope with a loss in test.
Well,
1.
I just think I believe historically that's true.
I think there is precedent for that. Yeah, obviously they drew the series in New Zealand, having lost test 1, but that was kind of an exceptional one as well. But there's definitely you want to be getting off to a winning start, and there's truth to that end of season stuff as well. You see that in summer tours in general, but all of these Lions are at the tail end of what have been quite long seasons for them as well. So by the time test 3 rolls around, that could be very, very taxing, and there'll definitely be physical hits in every one of these tests, so you expect a few men to go down, and it's gonna, all of those kind of miles on weary legs will tell eventually. But the Lions will hope to start quickly.
They will. I mean, the dynamics of the game we'll get into momentarily. It is to be a fascinating encounter for sure on the field, especially in the wake of that South Africa A game. But we do have the squads to dig into. We have both teams. Nienaber was first to name his squad. He named his on Tuesday, got out ahead of it, and there were some surprises in it, I must say. We can go through it now. The front row he named was really the main surprise for me. He went with Oxenche, Bongi Mbonambi and Trevor Nyakanye, who are all very fine players and are very capable players, particularly in the loose, and at times at set piece. So like Bongi Mbonambi can be very solid, and then at times his throw can go. But in the main, my concern would be about the 2 props as far as their scrummaging acumen. But I know Nyakanye has been good, but he lost his battle with the Georgians and lost his battle in the South Africa A game against Wyn Jones. He's 0-2 for the season of Test rugby that he's
Yeah.
in at tight head.
It's true,
And he gets another go of it.
He's
So
keeping Malherbe, keeping the what we would argue perhaps the front row or the main front row on the bench for Test 1. There's definitely a tactical element to it as well. As it is a 3-test series, you're going to want these guys available for all three, and you can deploy them differently. But yeah, it's definitely an area that we didn't expect. It's just as well that we have the teams because it's
Oxenche and Trevor Nyakanya. I wouldn't have thought. I thought Trevor's time would have been done after that South Africa A Lions game, especially when you consider the likes of Wilco Lowe, Vincent Koch, Thomas du Toit not involved in the matchday squad. A lot of faith being put in Trevor Nyakanya, but they might see something that hopefully they can deliver on. In the second rows, no surprises. The usual locks: Evan Etzebeth and Franco Mostert. And then in the back row, Khaleesi's back, captain of the team.
Yeah, that is something of a surprise because there was a bit of news broke, a half break that Am was going to take it because he was still COVIDed. That came out on Wednesday, I think, but it turned out to be no, because then they released the team shortly after put water on all that.
No, indeed, Khaleesi's back. I kind of did expect him to be back. Peter Steff at 7 is just a stalwart. Yeah. Don't expect him to feature a lock at all. Expect him to be constantly there in that 7 jersey, on pivotal on both attack and defence,
because they have Lou Diager back on the bench as well. So no need for him to switch from his role at 7.
Not at all. A bit of a surprise at number 8. They've gone with Quagga Smith, who they'd selected against Georgia. He's been spending some time in Japan. In fact, very dynamic, quick number 8, as opposed to Visa, who hadn't done a damn thing wrong. He was being excellent. He was doing an excellent impression of Dwayne Vermeulen on the pitch. He just wasn't quite Dwayne Vermeulen. But they've gone with speed instead from number 8. Which
I was reading what is it? There's a 7-year, 13-centimeter, 22 kilogram and 47 cap difference between the two, which was quite a harsh string of stats. I think there's more to Quagg is a very different kind of player than Dwayne, but it gives them something else, a different option from number 8. It'll be interesting to see how they gel though, that whole back row back in tandem.
100%. It's a slightly new combination, so there's definitely intrigue there for sure. Faf de Klerk still at 9, but Pollard comes back in at 10, much to the relief of South African fans everywhere. They haven't found a suitable backup.
No, they haven't yet. There were a few experiments. Mornay experiment I don't think was a success, given that Elton's now back on the bench. So they're still up in the air. Pollard is their guy, but he's available for Test 1, which is the good news if you're a Springbok fan.
Massive news for the Springboks. Definitely changes, just adds a whole element to their game that they didn't even have in the A game that they won. Dale Indy and Am, always a stalwarts in the centre, and they've gone with that World Cup winning back 3 of Makazole Mapimpi, Cheslin Colby and Vili LaRue. No room for Fassi despite form, no room for Nkosi despite form. And interestingly, they have gone with the 3 backs on the bench. They've abandoned their 6-2 split. They got Herschel, Elton and Willemse. Apparently there are some concerns over Mapimpi potentially and Pollard potentially, so they just don't want to take any risks, which definitely is a factor.
It is. And it means they're not only are they without big Dwayne Vermeulen and are therefore X amount of kgs lighter in the back row, they don't quite have their indomitable bomb squad of 6-2 split,
which might be the thought behind having that explosive front row unit to bring on, because against Georgia that worked a treat. Georgia. That was
the last time we saw them, and it worked a treat. It ended the game. It was already creeping towards over, but that was a cruel hammer blow to deliver. Was those 3 boys coming in at 60 minutes?
Phenomenal players, each and every one of them. So that definitely is impact. And Lou Diager's impact as well. And Elstad makes up the rest of those subs. As far as the Lions,
the Lions as well came in with more shocks. Like, it was a good thing we didn't wing this one, as I was saying, because we could have been spitballing all kinds of teams. But the team that we've landed on was Wyn Jones getting the number 1 jersey, with Cowan Dickey and Furlong making up the front row. Very colourful front row. We have Wales, England, Ireland. Itoje and Alan Wyn Jones, captain, make up the second row, with Courtney Laws at 6 as well, getting the nod there. Currie and Conan make up the rest of the back row there as well. Very, very strong mobile pack, and some impact on the bench. You have Hamish Watson and Tyg Byrne on the bench, as well as at the front row union you have Sinclair, Ken Owens and Rory Sutherland as well covering.
It's interesting, isn't it? It was a shock to me to see Jamie George not involved. I really rate the explosivity of his carry game
and
along
his
with his hands.
Exactly.
I like him to mix that up. There's parts of this that I like more than others. Felt like Tyke Byrne was worthy of a start. I just thought, his ranginess, his capacity to throw tip-on passes and wide passes, I think extremely helpful.
Yeah.
I think this speed and subtlety of movement is what undoes the Buck defence as opposed to physicality, but they've gone with very meaty set of forwards. What I would say is that there's no clangers. Like Cowan Dickey, you could argue maybe in areas needs to patch up his game, like his tackle technique where he comes flying down people's ankles.
Spear tackle. He gave one penalty away in the South Africa A game for that, and he did the exact same thing in that great performance in the Stormers. It just wasn't called in that instance. But
it's a very noticeable thing that could come up. But he's been brilliant at the breakdown, brilliant in all kinds of areas. And unsurprising to see him come in. Nothing wrong with Ken Owens. So while there's not really concern in that position, even though there is surprise around the absence of Jamie George. And likewise, even in the back row, like Courtney Laws is an interesting call, but he's not he's still a world class player who on his day can be relentlessly physical and not let you down and make a load of tackles. And it's definitely
hope for that guy, that Courtney Laws. That's
indeed
what they want.
It's a pack that to my mind is built to try and take on the set piece and try and be just physical around the breakdown. I think they want to win the forward battle or at least nullify the box up there. So it's a meaty, strong pack.
Yeah, good scrummaging unit as well. And as you were highlighting a bit of concern about the starting scrummagers for
Springboks,
compared to what you'd normally think are monstrous standards of a starting tight row for the Springboks. This is definitely, there's a hint that this could be an area that the Lions look to target, and if they can, then boy, that would be the making of them. It would be halfway there. And then as for the backs, a very interesting combination of the backs, one that I didn't see coming. We have Ali Price at 9, Bigger at 10, Henshaw 12, Daly 13, Van der Merwe and Anthony Watson on the wings with Stuart Hogg at fullback. And then the backs cover on the bench as well. We have Conor Murray, Owen Farrell and Liam Williams. No room for the Welsh Flyers on either wing. Seems crazy.
Yeah, well, it is and it isn't. I would
There's
say
a lot of quality.
I would say the same point in regards to the wingers, especially, is like what you really want from your winger is to be lethal in space. And to be fair, I think Doohan, Anthony Watson, and the two Welsh lads all are.
Yeah.
So I don't think there's an error there. Personally, I like just going with the guys who are in red hot form. I would have gone with Young, Reece Zammit, and Josh Adams. But I definitely think it's much of a muchness. Like Watson, ball hasn't fallen for him too much, but I remember in the one game he did play, he had just a couple of moments where he just exploded away. He was still very, very quick, and Doohan can't stop scoring himself, so I think you have to give credit where it's due there as well.
Yeah.
Top try scorer in the Six Nations finds his way to the line.
It's true.
That's the main job of the winger.
It is. And Stewie Hogg getting the nod is something I do like, because those are the kinds of spaces you want to attack, and hopefully if he's on form they can find it. Elliot Daly Henshaw was a combination I didn't see coming. I think it's gives them a kicking option at 13 for sure, but I just fear for Daly up against Dam, to be honest. I'd be very fearful in the physicality and just in the contact area.
Yeah, they're going to want to get him in space. Daly's an interesting one for me, is that like he's had his issues. He's had games where you think he's not great, but he's also had moments of absolute brilliance.
True.
Even like in his own end zone, some of his scramble plays have been fantastic. He's got a phenomenal kicking game, and he's got excellent footwork and huge ability. I don't think it's a situation like one with Matt Tamua, say, in Australia, where we're giving out about a selection because we think that there's going to be a real weakness there, and like if Tamua has to throw the skip pass to put a guy in, it might go forward or it's not going to stick. Like Elliot Daly's in a crucial pivot position, but I think if he's put in space, he'll execute. I don't think there'll be a problem with that. I think he'll find them if he has to execute a 3-on-2, he'll stick his man and give a good pass. They are all real quality. I definitely think the centre balance is interesting. They've shifted Henshaw one in from the ideal 13 channel, probably with a mind to how that game went against the South Africa A team, where a lot of what took place happened inside it. And really, I think they want to get Henshaw involved on a defensive end on the inside, being physical, being on top of the box, stopping them from behind the gain line, getting some of that aggressive tackling going from the inside of the centre position, and just not allowing any of those sort of Delindy sit down plays to take place, as might have been a Bok plan if the likes of Farrell had been selected.
And Farrell does occupy a spot on the bench as well, coming in. Him and Conor Murray off the bench has potential impact. I think that I see that more as a game closey outy kind of, as opposed to a get back from 14-point deficit kind of change.
It is what I didn't want going into the tour. I did say that. I was like, no, I wanted,
Marcus Smith.
No, it was Finn Russell,
Finn Russell,
and he's obviously out. But I was saying, like, you shouldn't go with Bigger and then Farrell. You shouldn't go with both of them. they're like for like. I think you need to have that change
if
of play
if
option.
Bigger's not working, I don't think Farrell will change too much from what he's doing, whereas Marcus Smith might.
Yeah, I would have gone with Marcus Smith. I would have just I would have just punted on it.
Yeah.
Now I don't know. It's very Hail Mary, but it's probably a precaution for if Bigger goes down, you want Farrell to come on. If Bigger picks up a knock early doors, you want Farrell to come on and not Smith because you think Farrell might have the experience. It is a huge ask throwing a kid out against the best defence in the world. A defence the like of which you'll have never seen, having never played true Test rugby.
Yeah, it's all true.
So
that's all true.
That probably is the reason he's not involved. I just think it's a shame that we don't have that sort of game-breaking potential impact of Finn Russell just to find
you do have Liam Williams
space.
on the bench, which is useful impact as well into a game. But it's definitely interesting. Price getting the nod at scrum half was interesting as well, because I actually thought he did inject great tempo, which the like of which we can't achieve with Murray. So in that sense, I did like it. I thought he was all kinds of loose against the Stormers, even though he was getting loads of credit for it. I thought like the majority of his plays were pretty poor, and then when Gareth Davis came on, I thought they were improved greatly, and some of the scores they got there. So I'm worried a little bit about the halfback, especially.
He was very good. He was very good for the tries, Ali Price.
Yes.
He was good. He was good picking off the base. He's always good like after a line break. Mm-hmm. If you can make a play after a line break, Ali Price will dial into the attack, get his hands on the ball quickly. And like I'm thinking back to that Scotland game against Wales where he put in that delicious little chip over the top for a try. Mm-hmm. Like he does have all those skill sets, and he does get very dialed into offensive play. But like he's one of those guys who, you know, it takes him getting dialed in to execute class plays, and then sometimes he's dialed out, and then he's loose, and then he's not quite there. And that Bok defense does just change everything from a scrum half's point of view. You have to be so sharp, otherwise you're going to get eaten alive. And the scrum half stocks, it was always going to be a difficult call. I personally probably would have gone with Gareth Davis. I think he's got the cleanest, quickest pass of the three of them, and I would rate that. Yeah. But I don't think you can overlook either that the one start that he had, he didn't do that great. But he did look off the bench like he was coming on, like he was a man who was trying to make up for it, who knew he didn't quite have the best game the last day and was really making a push for the test team. So I do expect him to feature in one of the 3 weeks, but it won't be this week. And there's not a huge amount between those scrum halves, but on the face of it, I like them going with tempo over Murray personally. That's true.
That's certainly where my head is at. It should mean that the kicking kind of job should shift from 9. If Price is kicking very often, that's no good, because you have like Bigger, you have Daly at 13, you have Hogg outside, and that's all going to be there's a really good balance to that. There's lefty righty, there's good stuff in that back line as well, so there's definitely a thought process to this. It's just if he's in there to impersonate Murray by box kicking, then that's going to be a problem, I think, from 9. But those are the teams anyway. We will pivot in and just preview both sides, I guess, look at the winning conditions for both, and we're going to start with the hosts, that is South Africa. And with South Africa, it's quite a simple thing. Like, we all know what the Boks are going to do, but it's whether you can stop it, and that's the question. It all starts with disciplined but hyper aggressive defence, pressure kicking and defence.
Indeed, they get the ball early doors. They are kicking it to the Lions and testing them. There are a few areas they'll have to dial in, but it is just about applying pressure. They generate more points, almost as many points through not having the ball as having the ball.
That's true.
I don't expect anything different from them. I think they'll be bullish in their attempts to I think they'll fancy as well. You know, it's a Lions team that's so, you know, been so spliced together. There's not too much in the way of competition. I think early doors they'll look to sort of break Lions' confidence and just let them know that they're not going to be able to dominate them up front. I think that's the main thing. On the face of it, it looks like a Lions team that's built to try and win the forward battle. The Springboks got to get on top of them, got to be physical. That pivot position on defense of Peter Steph du Toit, shutting down the Lions. The first phase, I would say this for both teams, and I'll get into it with the Lions as well, but that first phase after the Springboks kick a box kick and the Lions, you would assume, recover it. That first phase needs to be dynamic and aggressive on defense, and they brought that in spades in the South Africa A game. There are even some videos after the game, just looking at the forwards, just some isolated moments of how quickly they got around the corner, how quickly they got off the line and started smashing those Lions carriers. And that's where, you know, you say you don't want Arlie Price kicking. If you're the Boks, you can kind of force that onto them. You can force either Bigger to sit way deep in the pocket or Ali Price to have to kick from the base. If you can just come up in a line, smash your first tackle, maintain your discipline obviously, but then come flying up, shut down the outside and force the Lions, if they have to make one tight carry in the first phase after a box kick, chances are they're going to kick it back, and that's where the Boks go to work. You know, that's
true.
That's what gets them dialed in.
That's their model. Oops, excuse us. But that's their model for how to win these big games is literally create the pressure and just capitalize on defensive errors. If they're going to happily cede the opportunity to throw the ball around to the Lions, because they know that the hunger off the line and their dynamic speed and physicality in the contact will upset their rhythm and then get them engaged in a slightly slower kick-oriented game, which is what we saw in the first test. At the very beginning, the Lions were kind of keen to go ball in hand until they got swallowed up a few times, and then it became a box-kicking kind of frenzy in the next half hour.
Defensive pressure at the breakdown was a huge part of that as well. Smashing through over if the Lions will want to be sharper in terms of their breakdown cleanouts, but definitely the Boks will be looking to target that, and see Khaleesi hits a ruck really well on defence,
especially a wide ruck. If it's a ruck with a couple of backs in there, you can see Khaleesi absolutely skittle them.
I expect them to start tigerishly on defence and just let the Lions know that they're not getting anything off, that they're a bit too clunky. Pressure Ali Price, force the slow play, get on top of the breakdown, make it a mess, and force the pace of the game down, and then the Lions are kicking it, and that's mission A done. And then chances are you're recovering the ball and hammering it back deep, keeping the physical pressure on, and through just winning the contacts, controlling the game a little more.
Absolutely. And in games like that, discipline and set piece organisation become a fulcrum, and they become very, very important. And that's, like, as you say, the Springboks know that very well. That's how they manage these games. They try and create a scenario where discipline and set piece are the important factors, and they're on top of them, because they are, like, if they're under pressure, they need to be mindful of the technical penalties, things like high shots, things like kind of, if the Lions are finding a bit of space, you can't risk the high shot and the yellow card. You don't want it. You kind of want to control your defence as well. But also the set piece is very interesting. We were mentioning the front row selection they've gone with, obviously with a mind towards springing those guys off the bench like they did against Georgia to break the back of the game at 60 minutes. But first there's a 60 minutes that's going to be an intense battle, and the Boks will want to get on top even then, because if they can, with those guys to come on, if they can get an edge at scrum time, I think it'll be a killer for the Lions. So I don't think the Lions will expect it necessarily.
No, not necessarily. There is a potential weakness to that forward pack, to that front three, I would say. You know, Bongi and Manambi as well has to get his lineouts right. They're going to have Itoji and Alan Wynne-Jones breathing down their necks,
with Laws in there, and then Byrne off the bench. All of those guys,
they were supremely efficient at the lineout, even despite Dweeba's one pump fake free kick. Outside of that, they were pretty perfect at lineout time. They do have that set piece very dialed. It will be an area of significance for them. I also think just on the ball, that there's a lot of talk that they don't do much on the ball, and that, you know, they're a forwards team and a defensive team, most of which is true, of course. But I definitely think with Pollard in there is potential for them to catch the Lions on the hop a little bit. I would fancy if I was the Springboks taking on the outside of Elliot Daly, trying to flood that 13 channel. I think we saw against Georgia, people are sort of overlooking that, a bit of variation in their play. Obviously in that game, in the South Africa A game, Mornay Stain was at 10 and prohibited a lot of that. Almost all of the play was off Faf.
It was very much all off Faf.
And while most of it will be off Faf in this game, Faf can bring the game very wide. He has a number of options to him. I mean, we spoke about this in our South Africa A preview, is just the variation of passing and runners he can hit. We saw a bit of it in that A game. In fact, little forward screens in micro spaces, finding Etzebeth on an outside shoulder, hitting guys. And then I think Pollard, you know, he has a very good read on the game. If he can see a moment to go, I think he'll go and he'll stick a pass, and they should definitely fancy taking on the wide channels. They had Peter Steff in that Georgia game roaming out wide.
They did.
That's
a very useful innovation.
Yeah, I expect to see them bring it back. I expect them to see them in the offensive third. Not at the beginning of the game. In the beginning of the game, they'll kick quite a bit.
Yeah.
But when they're in the Lions half, I'd expect them to try and catch them on the hop a little bit, move the ball through Faf de Klerk. I mean, there is another side to this Springboks team that's not often talked about. Like when they won in 2018, when Razzie first came in, and they won that series against England, where they just ran them ragged.
They did. Faf just going tempo.
Yeah, I expect them to bring it a little bit of that. It's not as mobile a Lions team and a Lions pack as it could be in terms of the guys they've selected. Actually, there are some exceptions. Jack Conan is obviously is a mobile selection. You know, Currie can go with the best of them forever. But in general, just Laws in at 6. It is like it's a meaty forward pack as opposed to, you know, your Adam Beards or those kind of guys. So I definitely think that if the Boks are a step ahead of the game, you might actually see a bit more tempo on offense and width.
I think we'll innately see more width. Like we'll definitely see more of the carry game of both Am and Dialindi in this game, just by virtue of Mornay not being a 10 and Pollard being back there, because Pollard will not shirk a contact. We know that well. Sure, sometimes he might not throw the pass that's on, and that's sometimes a vice of Pollard's is that he loves the contact a little bit too much for a 10, but he'll be a carry option. And then if they can see the outside of, like, Robbie Henshaw will probably be in his roaming role in that midfield. If you can get it outside him through a Pollard pass and find either Am or someone else who can link with Peter Steff out there is space. There's a lot of space to attack out there. And I think in the second half, when things start to open up, those are the kind of little moves that you might see to break the game open from the Springboks. But generally, I think the defense is going to be their main focus more so, because and even to be honest, it yields more of their points. Like the ones that came, the South Africa A game, there was a charge down try and there was a loose exit kick to Cheslin, and that was all she wrote. They're going to try and create an environment where there's a fair bit of kicking, and they're going to try and be the ones capitalising on the scramble.
And
they
are great. They are good in the chaos. They are good in the scramble, and that I would include Mapimpi in that. I think he's a big addition. If recent form is anything to go by, if he can kick on from where he was, he's an explosive, turbocharged, strong guy, and surprisingly so. He could definitely get one or two plays off against Anthony Watson. I'd venture to say on that way.
So I know that the Lions will probably, and the Boks will need to be aware of the kicking game. They'll target partly his wing with Billy LaRue just by avoiding Cheslin Colby, because they had that footage from the South Africa A game of kick it down to Colby, try. Okay, let's not do that. Mapimpi's just back in. We'll kick it over to his side. Like, ideally, if they're loose kicks or under pressure, if Peter Steff's doing his job, pressures the kick enough, Mapimpi can run that one right back. And like they do love that kind of game. So as much as like vertically challenged in terms of the air, they're pressuring the kick so much that if there's no innate pressure on that, once they get down there, they're so dynamic. Like Mapimpi is very, very strong and very dynamic and very fast. If he gets his hands on the ball and in the open space, he can be lethal. So like all Bok wingers, they have that streak and they will look to capitalise. They have a good match awareness, that is, they can be patient for 60, 70 minutes, but if the space presents itself in the 72nd minute, he'll go and he'll take a try.
Yeah, I would say that one point of concern does lie on giving the Lions entrances. I think if you're highlighting the main concern, like if there's a path, like on paper, I actually think this I don't know if it's the strongest Lions team on paper. Maybe I'm full of it, and they go and win. But I like, it's not the team I would have selected. And I think there's vulnerabilities there, especially in the back line, to be honest with you. Like, I think that midfield area of like 9, 10, 12, 13. Certainly, if you told me a few months ago it was going to be Price, Bigger, Henshaw and Daly, I'd have been like, really? That's what it's going to be? And I think that on paper, certainly, Faf, Pollard, Dialindi and Am is stronger.
Yeah. And
they can be extremely confident about their ability to, I would think, in general play, to shut down the Lions. Their experienced defensive team, not allow the Lions to get outside them. They should feel confident about their ability to move the ball, to attack the Lions' weaknesses in the 13 channel, to play their game as well.
Yeah.
All of that stuff they should feel confident in. But the areas of concern, and I think the way that they could lose the game from their point of view, is if the set piece goes awry, if the scrum goes awry early doors,
or the line out, or even the restart, their dialed out restart plays return to haunt them potentially.
Exactly, or the line out, as you say, if Itoje gets all over their maul, like Bongi and Manambi is kind of an interesting dual one, is that he has the odd loose throw and yet he has a load of maul tries. They're they can be extremely efficient in the maul as well. Like if all of that goes well for them, I do see them winning the game. I think they should be confident in that. But if the Lions get on top of them with the scrum, if the line-out becomes a mess, and then if the Springboks lose their discipline, start jumping offside, the defence, while great, needs to be very mindful of the offside line. I'm sure that Nick Berry's going to be watching it like a hawk.
Yeah.
And then you can see
also just the keeping of the feet.
Yeah.
And like Springbok teams can let penalties cascade when momentum goes against them, and Australian refs can let you get in their bad books as well.
Yeah,
like,
and if the Lions are constantly on offense, you could see in the first game, in the South Africa A game, like the Lions got a lot of stick for the constant tap and goes that ultimately didn't yield a try pre-half time. But actually that whole sequence where they wrestled the momentum of the game from the Springboks truly, by just doing those pick and jams and waiting for the offside, it'll be a real test of the Boks to if they end up in that situation, to try and repel them without conceding cards and penalties, because that's a killer. And then they showed great defensive hustle in that period. It was brilliant to watch, but it was very, very costly and nearly cost them a game they were in control of.
True.
And then on the other end of it as well, just not letting them have those entrances, understanding the value of those red zone attacks, and respecting the fact that the Lions have been pretty clinical in that area. Not perfectly so, and they got stick for not being clinical, but I actually think that sequence where they ended up taking 2 yellows off the Springboks was as good as a try for them.
Yeah, and they did get the try just after half time with the extra 2 men.
And then the Boks ended up tired, or South Africa A ended up tired and ended up not sort of in the game, and they kind of clung on to a 17-13 win.
All true,
They still won the game, it was grand, but I think that's definitely a point of concern if you're the Springboks. You're looking at areas to focus on.
Can they make a red zone goal line stand? Can they convert when they're in the red zone? How many will they give up?
And how many opportunities will they give up? Penalties in the middle third of the pitch are just can be so expensive.
And we've seen the stat, that the emerging stat of the year, the points per red zone visit as well. Like the Boks with Pollard on the pitch will kick their threes and will try and build a score and build pressure. If there's no immediate score on, they're happy to kick 3 and exit again and defend again, because it's a simple game plan, as you say. It's just it's easy enough to write down on paper, more so than the Lions. The Lions is a bit more scatterbrained because you can play a million different ways. The Boks have an identity of physicality, of marauding defence. But as you were highlighting, there are a few developments on that game as well. There are a few more subtleties to their offence now. They're obviously world champions and it's 2 years later. But it's there's been growth and evolution in that team.
Some of that was parked, some of that was parked. They didn't fully show their hand in that first A game. They didn't show much on offence, but they do have an offence. And
they've got their main first choice 10 back in there.
And Robbie Henshaw, instead of being picked at 13 to shut down the outside, as we talked about, he was picked on the inside to try and be physical on the basis of that game, just getting Del Indy space.
Makes getting outside him pivotal. If you're the Springboks outside, if Henshaw is not involved in the play, if he's inside where the ball is, you're halfway to a try already. The open space out there, and you just have Daly and perhaps a back rower to sit down. And
I believe they could take it. I think you might see more from the Springboks offense in this game, but as you say, the defense is what it's all about for them. So let's go to sort of the summary of what the Springboks are all about and what they're hoping to bring. From the Lions' point of view, things are a little more grey, a little more complicated. First of all, they'll need to deal with what the Boks are bringing. From my point of view, I think I've said this already, really, but it isn't a test. It's kind of a schizophrenic team almost, is that it looks in the main to be a team that's about the kicking game, the physicality, the set piece. Let's win in those areas if we can. Let's try and disrupt the line out, use our Toji and our Alan Wynne-Jones to do that, have clean, precise ball ourselves, have the physicality to carry and maul with these Springboks.
Varied options to kick and exit. We have Daly's left peg, we have Bigger's right peg, we have all of this.
Exactly. And Wynne-Jones at the scrum as well. So you would think on paper that it's a team that is about, take as Wales tried to do in that semi-final, kicking most of the ball, taking the game to the Boks up front and trying to grind out a tight one where neither offense is on top. And in the main that's true, but there's a couple of selections that would encourage you. I think Conan coming in at 8 is definitely a great addition. I'd like to see him getting wide, and I think Ali Price, to be fair, that's a call that doesn't reflect that game plan. It's a call that reflects speed. I mentioned in the Bok preview that I think one of the key phases in the game is what happens when after the Springboks kick from the base, what happens the first phase after. I think it's so telling about how the Lions are going to play. It's not necessarily about razzle dazzle, we're going to throw it and end up in Am's face the whole time. It's just about sitting down that Bok defense and not allowing it to oppress you. And what happens a lot of the time is that when teams are slow on the fold after they catch a box kick, you get eaten alive. You see it in all kinds of levels of the game, but especially if Ali Price is just slow getting back, if everything's slow and there's a forward hit up set up, then chances are the Boks come out, they win that contact, everything's slow, everything's more difficult. If the Lions can play with just a little more speed and get what I would hope to see is like a 2-pass play, not involving the 10, but a 2-pass play involving forwards, and really trying to target the pivot position that Peter Steff brings to that defense, where he's on the edge, he's got a rake load of forwards inside him, and then he's coming up and trying to oppress the Lions.
He sets that vicious line speed from the inside himself.
He does, but it's extraordinarily narrow. And so the Lions need to have confidence in themselves from phase 1 to stand in a wider position in pod, stand wider and deeper, trust Ali Price to get there quickly and to fire it wide, then make your calculation on where Peter-Steph is. Do you need a tip-on pass? But somebody should ideally be running like a sit-down line on the outside shoulder of Peter-Steph du Toit, and he needs to be found with from 2 passes or 1, and then he needs to just be charging at Peter-Steph's outside shoulder, eat a tackle in there, and then the next phase, very, very quick around the corner, and all of a sudden that oppressive Bok defence with everyone inside, Peter-Steph and everyone inside him, that ends up being nullified, and then all of a sudden you can work some space. And that's not to say that Am isn't going to shut things down outside you and you don't need to throw a mad skip pass. It could just be enough space for Bigger to get a good kick-off, or Hogg to get a long spiral down the pitch as he dialed in so well.
Just
in the
kicking on your terms. If you're if there's nothing wrong with employing a kicking game if that's all it's on.
Winning the kicking game isn't done from the base of the ruck if you're the Lions, in my view, because that is where the Boks eat. They just love it. They get dialed in. If the Boks can sit you down and get you inside Peter-Steph off that box kick recovery, everything slows down and everything becomes inevitable. The whole sequence of the play is just dead. Whereas if you can get outside of him, I think Wales demonstrated it really well in a moment against Argentina in a game that they were hockeyed. Because the Argentina team was more physical and their defence was great. But in one glorious moment, there was a wide pass. If you can watch this try, if you have the means to get the highlights in, because it's exactly what I want the Lions to do. There was a wide pass from the base of the ruck from Thomas Williams off his left that skipped a couple of forwards and found Leon Brown, the tight head, who was well wide of the ruck, near enough where the 10 would usually be in a standard setup. And then there was a Puma, because their defence is great, running a very similar line. It might have been Kramer or someone coming in to smash Leon Brown, and he just caught it, tipped it on to a player who was running basically from the centre channel. I can't even remember who exactly it was, but he came charging in at a cutting angle on the outside shoulder of the blitzing Puma, and he didn't break the line or anything, but he just went storming into that gap, had 2 or 3 Pumas converge on him, and then in the next phase, one of the only phases in the whole game, if not the only phase, Wales actually had a bit of room and were able to show what they can do. They were on a nice screen, got to the edge and scored a try.
Indeed, you got to earn that right.
That's it, but that's there against top defences. That's there. It's not an unbeatable defence, and the next evolution of the game, in fact, is the breaking of this defence.
It is,
and I think it centres around speed, width, but also just getting outside the pivot point of Peter-Steph, outside Peter-Steph, inside Lukhanyo Am, sitting down the Bok defence, and then the next phase, when they're sat down, moving the ball, you'll have a bit more space to work with to try and attack. And the Boks do leave space out there, so if you're accurate enough, if Bigger can get the ball dropped onto his toe and find out the likes of Watson in space, there are tries there for the Lions. But even just if they want to win the kicking battle, you want to get your elite kickers on the ball in a bit of space. Bigger, Hogg's spiral game is glorious. Elliot Daly, all of those
very
guys,
educated boots, for sure.
They need to be the guys kicking the ball, as you say. It doesn't need to be. Need to be priced from the base of the ruck.
No, and if it is, if his base of the ruck Boks kicks, of which there will of course be some, there'll be a lot of kicking. Like, you can't break the Boks defense down every time because it is formidable. But if he's outnumbering all of these other guys collectively, like for Boks kicks, if they're kicking 10 from the base and only 3 from the field out wide, they're probably not in the right kind of game for their chances. Like, as much as they will fancy whatever game, like they will play and fancy their chances in any kind of pace of game. They feel they can play high tempo, they can play physical, slow stuff, but it's just about being savvy. Like, you don't want to take the Boks on in their wheelhouse. You want to move them around a bit, and you want to try and, as you say, earn that right to attack the space out wide, because you do have distributing players and really fast, lethal wingers that you do want to find the pill.
The Lions have never looked better in this series than when outside backs were linking with loose forwards, all getting good hands going. We've seen Alan Wynne-Jones bring that game.
You've seen Currie be effective out wide. You've seen Cohen be effective
absolutely.
out wide.
Even Laws in one of those earlier games was getting his big arms through tackles and getting offloads away. Like, as much as those games were a training run, they need to, like, what is the value of going through some of those warm-up games, throwing a million offloads if you're not going to throw them in a match? Like, I would love to see the forward link plays become a real factor, and speed and width from the base becoming a real factor. And as much as the Boks, like, there's another angle to this, which is that they did try and play with a bit of innovation at the start of that A game and got eaten alive at the breakdown. Like, there's a couple of guys. Tyke Furlong is one for me. Like, usually a massive carrier, and that's a huge part of his game. he can still carry and he can still be involved in those plays, and at times he can break a line, but I think his main job in this team is clearing the breakdown.
Yeah.
And there's a few guys who are going to have to be designators, doers of that.
It's true.
I
think Currie out wide will be doing a fair bit of that as well. I think it'll be a massive focus just because of how dominant the South Africa A side were in that first 20 minutes. They couldn't win a breakdown at all, and it affected everything. It affected Murray.
Yeah, exactly, and that's what you need
to
what you need to have when you get to the edge. Like it's the added point to what I was saying there is once you get to the outside of Peter Steff, you can't afford to let Khaleesi over the ball. It needs to be telegraphed such that the guy who's hitting that hard line who gets the ball has Tadhg Furlong coming either from the inside or the outside to clear that breakdown, and Tadhg Furlong's remarkably efficient at that. He's brilliant at just being like you just need one man where you normally need two.
True.
He just comes in and clears the whole
area. He has a lot of weight and he throws around pretty technically.
And there's a few other guys like Cowan Dickey I would want in that role. Wyn Jones obviously does a lot of carrying and tip-ons, and that's a fine role for him, but the Lions do need to have the explosive clean outs and Laws as well. I would cite as another. The explosive clean outs, and then the speed of play. If you can clear the breakdown quickly, Ali Price can get dialed in, biggest game of his career, launching himself to the base of every ruck and finding the next pass really well,
sticking
exactly,
quick passes
with exactly, and that's the way. If you can you'll sit them down. Then if you can come onto the ball with pace and be just really accurate and wide,
accuracy is very important as well. I think it's crucial.
The passing has to stick.
It has to stick. It was one of the things that happened early in that South Africa A game is they got one of the first attacking forays, and Murray threw a longish pass off his left hand and went behind the 10 and then went to deck, and it's like those kinds of loose plays cannot be like that. Just the Springboks love it. They love it. They see a ball go to deck, they gobble you right up, and then nothing's coming of that set. But maybe you might be conceding a penalty, such as the pressure defence they'll be bringing. So as much as speed is very, very important, it can't come at the expense of accuracy. The passes need to stick, but there's, as you say, like it needs to be wide. That's where the space is in this. Like there's no sense going narrow. There's no sense if you're feeling that pressure just tightening up and going one out from that ruck. That pre-box kick set of just three forwards just wander up to like 2 yards away and then take a pop. If you start seeing that, the Lions are almost beaten already. If they're in that kind of mode very early in the game and engaged in this, I don't really rate their chances.
But that said, I don't think it's a Lions team that's going to be Harlem Globetrotting their way through the game. I think they need an element of all of that. I think they need to get to the outside to win the kicking battle. But I do think on paper that there's like the very specific attempt to match the forward pack in terms of its physicality, in terms of at the breakdown. They don't have necessarily a perfect jackler like Tom Currie.
No, I think it's more the offensive breakdown was the issue. Like whatever about stealing Bokball, the Boks will probably kick the ball to them more often. It's not as high priority as just minding your pill when you have the ball. That was their first failing in the South Africa A game was the breakdown, and it shocked everything. It was a ripple that kind of knocked the confidence of the whole team, because they are a bit more hodgepodge, and it is the main factor and the main tangible advantage that I really see the Boks having, more so even than home field advantage because there's no fans, is just that cohesiveness and coherence of game plan. Like you're saying, it's a bit of a schizophrenic team. Part of it is named for set piece reasons or for kind of forward domination, but then also you need to find the extremities. The Boks are keeping it simple, but that doesn't mean that you can stop it. And that the Lions will know what to expect, but a few key battles that they really need to be up for. And the breakdown is one. The scrum is a big opportunity. I think with the front row that the Boks have named, as we highlighted, a real chance to get stuck in. If they can get dominance in that first stanza or just even a few penalties, that'll upset the Boks. That's a real for them.
Penalties and entrances. That's what it's all about. And like that initial point I was talking about could only just be the beginning of the game plan. I think the broad Lions picture is to have bigger /Hogg /Daly have the ball on a string. You're moving the ball quite well enough to work a bit of space for those guys to ping the Boks back, get the ball deep in behind the likes of Willie LaRue, make the Springboks feel the fact that they're not at altitude, and therefore their kicks, as was demonstrated in that South Africa A game, not going as far as you might ordinarily see, but turning Willie LaRue, turning Mapimpi, more so than kicking to them, just kicking over them deeply into corners, setting up offensive lineouts, from which you can maul or even just keep it tight and physical, I'd say, in lots of ways. I still want, like, if you're carrying, I still think that edge position is very important, but I think they might try and maul off line out set pieces. I don't expect, like, to see them doing much razzle dazzle in the backs as part of the main game plan from the offensive third. I think it's going to be about trying to be as physical as the Springboks, trying to get an edge at set piece, winning penalties. And I actually think I'm curious to see if they do this, because, you know, at Test rugby at this level you just don't see it that often, but I would be curious to see if they just go to the corner instead of taking on threes early doors and try and change that mode on the box. Try and get on top of them if they're confident in their set piece, and if the Boks are a little off the pace and giving away penalties, if they can press home that advantage, maybe take a scrum on the back line, or just do their tap and go, buy offsides, try and buy cards.
Buy a card,
they like, if they can spend eons down in the Bok red zone and win that territory battle, I think that's their main entry point, and I think that's going to be a huge point of focus for them.
For sure. And then another just a quick tangible point that they will obviously have video for is just don't cough up cheap turnovers, because they're lethal on them. Like they won't score that much. They will feel confident enough, even with the kind of, like, the weaknesses, some frailties you might see in the middle third potentially, but I think they'll be confident enough of their ability to apply pressure on D and shut down, for the most part, what the Boks will be throwing at them before the Boks will probably kick. So they'll be confident on the multi-phase that they can defend them, but, like, it's up, like, with a game plan to kick, and with so many kickers, you can't afford them to be loose. You certainly can't afford them to be charged. You can't afford to be caught in possession behind the game line and turned over, because that's where the majority of these Springbok scores come from, 5 and 7 pointers. And if you can deny them, then they are a low-scoring, quite slow point-building team. If you can couple that with what you were saying about maybe grabbing a 5 or 7 point lead early doors, or an extra man advantage early doors, then you just keep the discipline and mind your head. Don't be throwing loose passes that are going to be picked off by Mapimpi or anything like that, and just try and kind of control yourselves through the game, manage the game, and get on top of it. Then there's inroads. There's definitely a path to success for this particular Lions team named for Test 1.
Yeah, absolutely. Just to talk about the defence, I know you make the point that the Bok defence is their offence, so the Lions defence doesn't have too much to do. There are areas that are of massive significance. I think the defensive maul could be a pivot point on which the game changes. They need to be sharp in that area.
Got Laws and Alan Wynne-Jones in there. They do have the acumen to stop it, but again, just because you know it's coming doesn't necessarily mean you stop it.
So Itoje in particular, like, dialing in the defensive maul work, not giving away penalties, but being his imperious self, where he can come through mauls and get his hands on the ball and staying there for 80 minutes and just not allowing the Boks to get anything off in that area, would be just that'd be just a killer play. And as far as defending them on the multi-phase, they do have to be a little mindful not to get too narrow, because I think that Faf and Pollard will have the odd really wide play in them, and certainly Faf picking off the base, there needs to be an element of trying to slow him down around the fringes, and there needs to be a mindset to get out of the line and to chop down these.
I think it will be Henshaw shifted in to lead that line in terms of from the inside. In terms of both timing of the push and spacing as well. Like, Bigger will obviously talk from the inside, but, like, as you say, mind that spacing. If the risk is getting too narrow and being caught cold out wide, where you are a little lighter, but I'd imagine then with that, at the pivot point that the Boks have in their distributing game is with Willie LaRue, and pressuring his passing lane and denying him time and space to stick any of these passes will probably result in the passes or kicks not being stuck. So, getting in his face, recognizing that he is the guy that if they're going to try and access the wide channels, they're probably going to try and go through. So someone on the shoot for that, but on the main is it happens inside, and I think all those forwards will be in for a massive test. Just the physical activity of tackling Springboks, of which there will be plenty of opportunity.
It needs to be chop him low and get over the ball. I'd love to see Cowan Dickey. He's been selected here over George, over Ken Owens. Does he have the capacity, as good as he was against the Stormers, to really be an absolute nightmare at that breakdown? Because they don't have an out and out poacher in the back row. I know Currie can do it, but Conan and Laws are not poachers at all.
It's Cowan Dickey really, and sometimes Wynne-Jones can get his hands in there and make
with the odd steal, but if they can get their hands in big moments and just not allow the Boks to get on top of them when they don't have the ball, I would fancy the Lions do that. They're nice and physical, the defensive tackling of the likes of Itoje, but obviously they cannot be outmatched as England
if they start to get
steamrolled,
that's the concern. Like Currie, you mentioned, like the last time he played the Boks was one of the worst showings I've seen from him in an England shirt, possibly the worst. Like, he's been brilliant and he's there on form and he's in great form, but in that World Cup final, he was one of the ones who was just bullied and completely taken out of the game. Underhill outshone him in that particular game. So that is a concern. There are six English, 3 Wales, 3 Irish, 3 Scots in this starting 15.
Right.
And it's like, just given the track record of England against the Box, coupled with the fact that they were 5th in this year's Six Nations, that's a slight worry for me, where I'm like,
I mean,
I don't know,
all the guys
maybe
in there
they're
have some
bullying.
value.
They're all of top quality value. They're all world class players. But I'm just looking at it thinking, the last time I saw these English guys go up against this Bok side, they kind of wilted a little, because it is so ferocious. It's just so tough to appreciate. From where we're sitting, we're just fans looking, but it's just the sheer physicality of those guys on either side when they run into you, or when you have to tackle them. It just wears on guys, really big physical guys that we watch in the Six Nations be domineering and dominant, and suddenly they're beaten up and bruised.
So
by
they
Boks,
have to be smarter. They have to move it around them, find the right areas, stop them on defense, exploit their ill discipline, and get on top of them at the set piece. They have to be the smarter, sharper team. But as far as how you think the game itself is going to go, who are you backing? I think we've spoken a lot like lads leaning towards the Boks. Is that where you're leaning?
My head is definitely leaning Boks. I kind of think that they have the advantage currently. I'm not fully convinced of the cohesion of the Lions yet. I think they're kind of still settling on sides and game plans. I think, as you said, schizophrenic is kind of a point, because the simple, keep it simple, stupid is a good moniker, and it's the Springboks are definitely doing that with their game plan. I think it's by the book Springbok rugby that will be prove them more solid, and with a deeper foundation than what the Lions are. The Lions have looked a little bit more barbarian in style in some of their warm-up games, and haven't really.
There have been some numbers going around of just the sheer lack of game time any of the combinations have had. The only combination as far as a pivot position, like as far as a group, like front row, second row, back row, halfbacks, centres and back three, the only combination that actually started together already is Henshaw Daly, who started last week against the Stormers. Every other combination is brand new, so there is that factor to things. And in a massive sense, we're kind of going in blind, because the Lions have looked so kind of loose, and they've had such fun in those other games, but they haven't had a proper run out. So the question is, how much of this have they identified? What kind of decisions have they made as far as weighing the balance of trying to go wide versus the consequences of going wide and not getting it right? I don't know what they've come up with, these coaches. There's a lot of different ways to go. My suspicion is, if they try and play a Bok game with the slow kicking, they might come unstuck. But if they can get out to the outside, then the possibilities are endless. The possibilities are there for a Lions win. There's enough quality there, I think, for sure. I'd love to see Conan on the board in the wide channels. I'd love to see just link play and stick and passes, and it all comes from those early phases around the base of a ruck. If you can just sit them down and move the ball into a bit of space, and then rely on a guy like Dan Bigger, who's so good under the high ball, who's so good at the kick chase, who's so good in so many areas. He's thrown passes through his legs and out the wazoo these days. He's got all the skills. If you can give him a bit of space to try and unlock the Bok defence that does offer space,
platform with a quick scrum half,
maybe he'll execute. Maybe he'll just put the ball on a dime every time and punish the Boks for being hyper aggressive and leaving a lot of space out there for lethal wingers to come and take.
That's true,
so
and
that's there's chances there for the Lions, but I truly don't know how it goes. But I do take your point about the cohesion of the Springboks, and I'm probably leaning that way myself, but I don't quite know.
Yeah, neither do I. I'll say for colour that the Lions do edge a classic with a kick at the death to make it a 2-point game. There have been a lot of 2-point games, so I'm going to say the Lions kick themselves to victory in the 81st minute.
What kind of score are you seeing though? How do you see that game playing out?
21-20. A scrap.
How many tries for the Lions in that one?
The Lions have 2 tries.
And who scores them? And how do they score them?
Jeez. Well, Conan in the wide channels.
Okay, but are they that's my thing? Is are they moving the ball around, or are they just trying to grind it out?
No, I think them moving the ball around doesn't.
I think it needs to facilitate it needs to facilitate the grinding of it out. Like if they just kick everything from the base of the ruck, I don't see them winning. Yeah. So I hope that doesn't happen.
Right. Yes, that's the hope. The hope is to see a good endeavour from the Lions and good tempo from the Lions, and if they can set their stall out and set the rhythm of the game. It makes for such if they can.
As much as I'm not saying this because I'm biased, even I just think it would make for such a dynamic and interesting series if they could get one over on the Bok defense.
Yeah.
I think the series would use it. I think the game could use it. I just think it would be very, very interesting to see his team get to the edge of them and find the extremities and just exploit the vulnerabilities of that Bok defense, and expose it for being, you know, as good as it is, just for being a little generous with the space it gives up.
Sure.
I'd love to see it. I think, you know, at some point in this World Cup cycle we will see it. If it's not from the Lions, it'll likely be from the All Blacks. But I'd love to. I think it would be phenomenal colour to sort of make the Springboks respond. But on the face of it, on paper, I think I fancy the Boks. I think the Lions are trying to go at them physically. I just don't see that. I just see
it
that
never seems to go
best.
well.
I think that'll just cancel out. And actually, on paper, I fancy the Bok backline to be just that little bit better than the Lions backline. That's a harsh one to say, but I don't know. I'd probably back the Boks to win, but it could go anyway. I'm just curious to see it play out.
Yeah, I just can't wait to watch it now. This Saturday, that's when it's going to be at. How do you see it going? Let us know in the comments down below. It's going to be such an exciting game. I just can't wait to see it. The test series is finally here. No more preamble at all. It's Springboks versus Lions, 1 of 3. So we're going to be here to preview and review all the games upcoming as well. But just excited for this test series, man. I can't wait.
It's going to be awesome. But yes, on that note, we will move on. There are other matters to discuss before we wrap up. The summer internationals did finish up over the weekend, the non-Lions Tour internationals. There were some doozies, very interesting games. There's a few hammerings, but a few shocks and plenty of points of conversation. It was it was a fun sort of curtain raiser to the Southern Hemisphere season /
closer for
the Northern Hemisphere season, and to that end, there were some sides, the southern sides, I think, were looking by and large a little hotter than the northern ones, who were looking a little tired. But in the main, there were some great games, and we're going to start with the greatest of them all.
Yeah, well, we had what a test series this was. Just absolutely tremendous viewing all around from all 3 tests. The drama, the intrigue, the quality rugby. We just knew it was going to be a classic. And it came down to Suncorp to the final test, and it was 33-30. A 3-point win for the Wallabies, with Noah Lolosio getting over a few nerves towards the end and then kicking clutch kicks in the end to see them home.
Yeah, he's probably a decent point to start on. What a game. That was his best game in a Wallaby shirt. He was very, very assured. Obviously nicked the try with the intercept.
Yes, he
did.
But
he also, that pass to Hooper where they broke the line, and then Tate McDermott scored for that riposte try, that very important try after shipping 10 points post red card. That was just that felt a little more like Wallabies from the World Cup in 2015. It was a nice quick try. It was just a line break and a score, and they've been hunting those kinds of tries. Tate McDermott's a very important piece of the puzzle, and he needs to stay in, because as well as bringing the tempo, he brought that tracking run. He brought it a few times, the DuPont tracking run. And the Wallabies have been throwing the ball around, going balls to the walls, trying to find tries from everywhere, and they've been a fresh break from the defensive minded teams in the world these days.
It's true.
They have been so hungry for tries, to the point of maddening naivety at times, that they just go to the corner every time. But they were a little more clinical in this game, and that was a great indication of it. It was a little closer to that 2015 team that was just grabbing tries for cheap. And I definitely think they're figuring some stuff out over there. It was a great performance.
It was
14 men for the whole game, but they flexed their muscles. They were really good.
Well, that was it. I forgot to mention that the game was ruined after 4 minutes. it was a red card, so the game's ruined, remember? And that was the same with the 20-all draw the week before. That was ruined by a red card as well. That great game. We need to stop with that chat, guys. But it was crazy. It was annoying that the 2 wingers were lost in the first 4 minutes.
Yeah, they played a wingerless game.
They did, because Daugunu went down with a niggle at pretty much his first contact. He went down with an injury, and in came Hodge, who was a little slow out there, but
didn't
for what they
like
were planning, he didn't. And one of the times, Lolosio threw an ambitious skip pass over the top, and he just wasn't there for it.
He turfed a few balls. He probably wasn't the sharpest. No, they genuinely went without wingers, but they did go with overloaded centres, and they moved the ball very well.
And they kept the ball very well.
That's
what it forces you to do when you're playing down a man, and for such a long period. It's just a possession game, and they did that, and they managed to tire out the French by doing so, and then forcing the usual old kind of things for the French revealed themselves. The inability to exit kind of reared its ugly head in the second half. It
arrived again, and having been kind of resolved. It did arrive again, and
it took Boutier coming on to boot them out to eventually exit, but it was already over.
It would be remiss of me not to mention, after all of my calling for Boutier, that he did turf a crucial ball.
He did. He dropped one that led to a scrum, that led to a penalty, that led to the winning of the game. Did he
it
not?
was pretty damn crucial. All right. So that was definitely...
There are costlier drops than others, and some were pretty bad.
That was not good for my man Boutier, unfortunately for him. The French were game for it all day long. They played a good game themselves.
Yeah.
I still don't think they're too far away, but the top 2 inches aren't there,
No,
and the
true.
little vacancies in their game are showing. I did think Kuyu had a fabulous game outside of the egregious intercept.
The egregious intercept was bad, but then the way he spearheaded the try of the series and perhaps try of the year, where he managed to, like, Tupou had just come on with Bell, so it was a brand new scrummaging unit for the Wallabies and an aggressive one, and they were getting a nudge on. And I love when a scrum half, the same point that you make about the maul, like, it's infuriating when a halfback's there having a discourse with the 10 while there's a man with a paw on the ball in the maul, and it's like, it's over, you need to get in there and solve that problem, but they don't. Where similarly at the scrum, like, it's on the halfback to notice if a scrum's buckling under pressure, and it's fractions of a second, because, like, buckling versus buckled, it only takes a split second for that picture to change, and he peeled blind instantly the second the pressure was coming. It meant that all the flankers were bound, so he could find
the Wallabies
Teddy
were given an 8-man shove,
Yeah.
so they were caught in the hoop then.
Yeah.
I mean, what a try. Fabulous. It was like the French in the 80s. It was like the tries
coast
from the
to
end
coast.
of the earth.
Yeah.
It was just beautiful. All the passing, crisp. I believe
And all off
Barassi
the
got
left
it in the
hand,
end.
the old left to right passes
yeah.
that caused so many people trouble, but no, it ended up with a beautiful skip ball to the open man.
Just simple, beautiful tracking rugby. Like, they make it look so elegant by doing just minimal amounts of work and just letting the runners do the work. And finding clean balls to them. It was just a glorious picture of support playing fluid rugby union in fine form. And a shame that it didn't win the game. It looked at that stage like it was going to be the winning in the game. But they did slow up towards the end. One thing I would say is that in my strongest French team, Teddy Thomas plays, I think, every time. I want Teddy Thomas in my team if I'm France. I don't understand. I don't think there's any player really in that setup. As much as they have a load of very good wingers, almost too many.
Well,
to choose
Villiers
from.
did his stock no harm in this series.
He did, but
didn't feature in the last game though.
over him. I'd take Thomas. I think Thomas is the most dangerous winger in France, and he needs to play. I just think he's like electric.
He is. When you put him in a little bit of space,
that was a tired enough team as well, and as good as it was from everyone involved, it doesn't happen without the class of Teddy Thomas.
No, the little chip at the head was beautiful. I know, true. His attacking instincts are next level, and he is a rangy athlete in the
Fabulous
wide. It's true. They didn't quite see enough of him because the Wallabies, as we said, kind of controlled the pill and managed to kind of smother themselves out into the game by playing a possession, a controlled game, which was good to see from young halfbacks in McDermott and Lolosio, and kind of a fledgling new centre partnership. I think they both went really well. The Paisami Ikatau one that was, and it was just, there was a lot to like about what the Wallabies did.
They were dialed in and motivated from the moment the red card came,
and then you have the
Suncorp was furious, and everyone was just they like, rightly or wrongly, and we'll get into that, they felt really victimised by that decision.
They did.
Mariko
Well,
was
that
their
always
star
happens.
player.
That always happens with if the home crowd will get on, like, it's the 16th man, but then it's just the 15th man. It's a levelling effect that they do have, and they did have it with that crowd there. And your point about the third test of these 3 test series always going to be tough for the Northern Hemisphere side, who's is a bit more weathered.
I think without the red card, it's a chunky enough win for the Wallabies. I think that the last minutes, France were really out on their feet, and the Wallabies sort of were as well. Like, it's such a crazy dynamic opening sort of 50 minutes to it, and it did slow down then. But it was fabulous rugby from both sides, real ding dong battle. I loved Wokie's try, a little pop down.
His first try for France. What a dynamic little basketballer's finish that it was.
What a series for him. I mean, what a result for him. That it's great stuff, really. But as is often the way, the decisive factor was Tupou. Off the bench, and that guy, I'm nearly ready to call him the best tight head in the world.
He's certainly looking at it, isn't he? Like, the way he shrugged off, there were 3 Frenchmen there when he took his try. That was only it was only 1 out, but there were 3 massive Frenchmen in his way, and he just knocked them over and went over. It's like he's freaky strong, particularly when he comes in at that last quarter against slightly tired bodies. It just seems an unfair mismatch.
He might be the best tight head in the world, and yet deploying him from the bench might be the best way to use him. Because he's so
we're
damn
seeing
explosive.
more of that. And like the top
and,
Couture has its rolling subs, which is changing the game dynamics that way. But then you see the Springboks we were mentioning at the top of the show, keeping what we would feel is their best tight row or the best front row unit on the bench to deploy from there. There's Eddie Jones has mentioned it. It's like they changed their role, status or finishes.
Yeah, that's it.
There's
there's definitely a very strong case now to be made for Alatoa's solidity to start with. Teddy Thomas breaks the game open against tired bodies who can't handle him, and he seems to do that with just incredible consistency.
Well, like he performs so well when he starts anyway, that when you throw him in that cauldron when people are like, I can't remember the name of the number 4 for France who came in.
He's the new boy Azago.
He came in for Cazot late. Cazot was named, and he did admirably for the first half, but in the second he had some clangers on defence were just
they were all
the fun
tired,
of being tired.
Young Hastoy at 10 didn't have too much
Jaminet was brilliant though. Jaminet was basically playing 10. He was at first receiver the whole time, and anytime they broke the line it was Jaminet who was slotting in at first receiver. He was very, very, very good.
And exciting.
What
for
a
France.
find for the season.
The kicks are awesome. They were right to call him up. So from that point of view, there's lots of positives to take from France. Young guys getting blooded. Barlow, great find. I think Gélange and Woki perhaps ready to make the step up to the first team, or certainly in that conversation.
Great series captaining from Gélange.
And Jaminet threatening that 15 jersey, eyeing it down already. So there's plenty of positives to take from France.
But no trophy.
As
goes to your point.
It's like, are they just going to be the world's most likeable losers?
They had sexiest try of the last year, but no trophy for that.
It's a funny one. They need to win something.
They do. They did win. The test win was enough to call progress. Like, they hadn't won in Australia since 1991. So like, that is a big thing to tick off any team's resume. And like, even talking about Ireland's development, when we won away in South Africa, that was a few years prior to winning an actual series over there. It's always going to be tough winning a series away from home, a young team that they'd named at the end of the season, all of these caveats, and ultimately a 3-point game. Like, they were good. They scored 30 points in that final test. Like, there's a lot, as you say, positives to take, but more so for Australia, who got over the line, got themselves a home series win, which they were more desperate for, to be honest.
Played for 75 minutes with 14 men and came out the better team.
Without Corabetti as well. It wasn't like it was a passenger that went off. It was Corabetti. No wingers to do it with, so they had to stay tight, stay physical, and they did.
What aged well was the bench then, because even though they were missing a winger,
Philip was big off the bench.
Valentini, they just had more physicality against young, inexperienced French guys, and that's where the French team probably fell down. They just didn't have the same level of quality and physicality to call on, and that was what took it away. But they held the ball really well, scored some lovely tries, managed the physicality of the French. It was still a game. It still took winning. They nearly gave it away at the end, but Tupou comes up with a match-winning try followed by a match-winning scrum. It was definitely a fun dynamic. One of the dynamics I enjoyed actually was the performance of Walker, the French guy who was marking Tupou, who ended up losing them the game when he got. He had the last scrum. He got poleaxed indeed, but he came on and he was kind of being hilarious off the bench. He was just scrumming at like about a 90-degree angle to where he should have been scrumming. Turned his body basically into the scrum the whole time, and then just kind of got low and stood up, and then he basically ended up walking into Tupou.
Force a reset was the plan,
and it looked to my eye like this was like a scrum coach's desperate ploy of like, this is the way, this is your best chance of handling this monster, is just make it ridiculous, and this ref might not know what's going on.
You might even get a free kick out of it.
Exactly. Just be as ridiculous as possible, and it was kind of working for him. He was like the Wallabies weren't getting the source of penalties they usually get with Tupou, even though he did go and score a try.
One of them was a try for France at the other end, so it wasn't quite working.
It wasn't quite working because of his ridiculous and illegal stance, but it was nonetheless amusing, and he was doing a good job of it. All the way up until that last scrum, which was the first and only scrum that he scrummed straight up and tried to scrum traditionally. And I don't know why. I'm sure the French scrum coach was like, no, go back to madness. And no, he got absolutely poleaxed or whatever.
Yes, he did. He got destroyed in that particular scrum. Excuse me while I adjust the microphone here. Pardon those headphone users. But it was an amusing thing. We were noting just as he was setting, I was like, this is a bit more square now. Oh, no, it's not.
Exactly.
That's kind of the thought looking at it. He was outmatched, and they were outmatched and outgunned towards the end, the French, but it was still no less noble an attempt for it, and it was such a good game. There was just so many high quality moments throughout the whole series, as you say. Just Kuyu, a find from halfback for them, Barlow as well. Tate McDermott injecting that tempo for the Wallabies. I thought Hooper and McDermott had a great little telepathy on defence and attack. It was beautiful. Hooper was everywhere. He had such a captain's showing in the final game. He really stepped up. What a player he is, and has been for so many years.
I'd nearly rank him, and this is probably sacrilege. He's 29 years old. He's been the captain for ages. He's a Centurion. I'd nearly rank him above Pocock at this stage.
Yeah.
He probably doesn't have the same natural talent that Pocock had as far as the jackling, and Pocock would argue that, you know, his capacity to reach Centurion level status and all of this stuff was hindered by just the injuries that he had, the unluckiness he had. But Hooper's just... He's such a trooper. He's Hooper trooper, but he's brilliant in all facets of the game, and what he does have is a dialed in appreciation for clutch and big moments in games. And when the rest of the young team are kind of scrambling away and are finding themselves in a position where they're going to throw away the game in a big moment, he's the guy who digs them out and comes up with a play in any context to get them back on track.
He did that for many moments in the exact game. I even loved his little chat to the ref when I think there was like a scrag high tackle that the French put in later on, and Hooper was going like, "Oh, is that not a card?" No, and it's like, no. It's like, "Oh, there's around 60,000 people who disagree with you," and it's like, "I know that." Yeah, it's just the hilarious chat from
the backs to the wall stuff that the Wallabies had going for them.
Yeah,
I guess we can talk about the red card now, which
didn't ruin the game.
It did not ruin the game, and it wasn't as outrageous as people are making it out to be. Like when I watched it live, I did say yellow. I said I think initial contact is to the shoulder, then he slides up to the head, but it's all very sudden. And then, you know, probably you can mitigate that down to a yellow, or you can say that that's just a yellow. But in reality, like, he takes the bulk of that contact. Jay Lunch takes the bulk of that contact to his head, and I don't really... The diving talk is more of a distraction than anything as far as the actual laws are considered. And what people aren't really looking at is Corbetti's technique.
Yeah, which is he's crazy upright. Yeah, when you freeze frame the end of the collision, he's literally upright. Yeah,
he comes sprinting from a mile away, lines his man up, and doesn't bend his back really at all.
Yeah.
Just pops a shoulder in.
Yeah.
And like, frankly, he's lucky that it catches the shoulder. If it had been a yellow, he'd have been lucky that he caught the shoulder initially and then rode up to the head. He caught the bulk of his contact, caught his man in the head, and he just didn't bend his back, lined him up and caught him smash face up. And the Wallaby commentators, like, they're like, Maloney's great, and he commentates the World Cup final, and I'm delighted that they picked him up in Stan Sport because he's enthusiastic and gives wonderful colour. He has just such a raw love for the game. Like, he can't help himself. Even when Wokey's scoring that great try, he just enjoys the game, and that's great. But they do miss this high tackle thing, and it's like the conversations around concussion that we're having, the dangers of the sport, and the changes in the laws that are now years old seems to have entirely passed them by. And they like he live commentating on it. It was just, what a shot from Corbett. He puts a marker down, and it's like, nobody, like, he just stood up and smacked him in the head with his shoulder. That's going to be a red most places in the world.
Yeah, it's true.
And it, like the hyperventilating outrage that's folled it to make out like this is some grand mistake from the referee. That's what Maloney said on commentator. This is wrong. Yeah. like, I mean, come off it, man. He can't tackle like that, and they're gonna have to learn. Like, whether or not that's a red card now, it'll probably definitely be a red card in 5 years' time.
True.
You're going to get more strict on these things, and it's not to ruin the game. It's just to improve technique to protect people's heads.
Yeah.
And you can still have as physical and ferocious a game as possible, but you can't just fling your body in an upright position towards someone's head. It's dangerous, and it's not good technique. It's not good for the game.
No.
I love Corbett. I think he's a class player, but he got that contact way wrong.
It's true. And he got punished for it, but the Wallabies coped really well.
Yeah.
And I also thought it amusing, he's now free to play next week. We had it in our news segment, but I may as well mention it here, but he's free to play because that has since been overturned in a court of appeal. And I was just noting that an enthusiastic Sean Maloney Aussie commentator, it's a good legal defence, you know, that he milked it defence or he bloody milked it. It's only really holds water if delivered in an Australian outraged accent. He's bloody milked it, look at him, he's holding his face, it didn't touch his face. It's like, okay, but it did hit his head.
There was one side upgrade. The top comment was like, all caps was like, can't believe he got a red card for something that wasn't even a penalty. And it's like, but laws? What's going on here? What game do you guys watch? The laws have been very clear on this for a while.
Yeah,
it's actually that said, you could argue it was a yellow.
Yeah,
it was
you could
probably
argue it's
on the harsh
mitigated,
end,
but you have
red.
to use the language like mitigated down. They don't seem to engage with that talk. That is very clear. And, like there have been guidelines.
I found it to be. I thought the referee's logic on the field made sense in that what he was saying was that there's direct contact to the head here, and you've come from a distance, is what he said, which would be an aggregating factor, which would offset any mitigating factors that are there. Like if you're coming from a distance, you've time to line up the hit, clear line of sight, and you still go high.
It was the same ruling that cost the USA against Ireland a few weeks back, where the guy was in the wide open space against Kelleher and he caught him clean in the jaw, and then the ref was saying it's like there was wide open space. It wasn't like he stepped into you didn't turn
anything but what you did.
Exactly. So
I Corbetti's fine, and it'll be great to see him back on the field, but they got to learn their lessons and they got to stop. Like, they're going to have some hard days if they keep refusing to adjust their technique and then crying foul when they get red carded.
Indeed. And also, the other thing is the game ruining narrative that is just patently, demonstrably untrue. Sure, even when we were watching it, one of the guards came in and got like, oh, there's a red card, that's that game over now. And it was like at 4 minutes was one of the passing comments. And it's like, sure enough, the team that got red carded won. It's like, it's not over. It was only just beginning. And then the week before, you had Argentina drawing level, 14-man Argentina drawing with Wales. It's like these games aren't ruined by red cards.
Both of them probably would have been blowouts if they hadn't.
Indeed, so perhaps those were enhanced by the red card. Like, it's just, it doesn't hold water, that argument. It's just a talking point that's thrown in there.
You can cope with 14. There's no doubt about it. But that said, the red card, while has been a driver of much conversation, is an aside to what was a phenomenal series.
Absolutely.
Played in fantastic spirits in the most part between two great teams, and it was the renaissance. It was from both sides. France, there was enough there, without their main men, especially in that last test with a really hodgepodge pack on the bench.
It was, we were noting that before, red card or whatever notwithstanding, that they were going to struggle off the bench with Tupou and Phillip and the like.
And they did, and they got slow, but the Wallabies also got slow because they'd been playing with 14. But in the main, I just think phenomenal talent. Both sides will take a rake load out of it, and the Wallabies will be confident. They're starting to stick passes. They're heading into their season now. They've got a Bledisloe match to prepare for, but they're in good shape.
Their young talented fly half Lolosio is not so green no more.
Nope,
he's had
better every game.
Yeah, he's had a fair bit of experience, and they have JOC to come back. They have Nick White, who hasn't featured yet. They have all these guys. Like, they're getting there. They're on the move in positive ways. I certainly think the Bledisloe test that they have coming up will be an intriguing one. Probably more intriguing than it's been for the last decade, just because of where this Wallaby side are at off the foot of results like these,
No question. But it's worth noting that they do have formidable opponents on Bledisloe Day.
They do.
As we will look at those opponents, the All Blacks took to the field against Fiji in a second game, and instead of putting 57 on them, they put 60 on them.
So I decided to just go 2-0 as opposed to the aggregate score for sake of,
Aggregate score 117-36 against a Fiji team that are not mugs.
No, Fiji team that are bloody good and played pretty well. Both of these games took similar shapes, actually. We talked about the previous one in the last podcast, but it was such a tight game. It was a 4-point game just as the 30th minute came around, and then it's just kaboom, boom, boom, and if the All Blacks have their bonus point try just before half time or whatever, in such a circumstance, they take games away from you when you go to sleep for moments.
What I love about this season so far, and I do definitely add the caveat that I'm extrapolating a lot from games against just the Pacific teams. Like, you haven't seen them play even Argentina's defense
or the Wallabies.
Like, the Wallabies will be the great step up for them, and it'll be curious to see how they handle that. But to see them against a Fiji team that tried to outmuscle them and tried to take the game
and
to
had some good success
on their own turf, they didn't do what they have been doing, which is go into this sort of, Sam Whitelock big man game and really trying to sit them down. They won the game. They went back to their roots, and they've gone with skill. They played with great skill, and skill set and discipline was Foster's message, but they've gone with skill. They have good discipline, but they're just playing with a freakish tempo, and they're striking in the key moments of the game just before half-time, just after half-time. They're killing the game in the key moments and then running up the score in the last quarter by being as relentless as we know they can be.
Absolutely.
This 2-match series, and even 3-match series, adding in the 100-point tonking of Tonga, it has been it has been very much back to the All Blacks as we know
Imperious.
them. But they've played their game. They could have done this in another way. They could have won the game in another way where they've gone back to being physical. And even like when they were winning games in and around 2018 and 2017, there was always that fear that they were kind of drifting away from themselves and they were going to be found out, which they were.
Yeah.
But this feels like an All Black team that is sticking to its core and playing with tempo and backing their freakish skill set.
Great accuracy. As you branded it last week, some cheat code rugby going on. When you see David Havili cut a line and Dyer does shoot a little high, but just cutting the little out the back pass to open them up.
It's just there. The skill set is on another level to any other team. Lions don't care. Like any other team on the planet, their skill set just looks to be on another level. And it's very exciting. If you're an All Black fan, I mean, there's been a lot of hyperventilating about Foster off the back of last season. I would be confident now. I think they made great strides.
They're on message and they're playing as you say an All Black game. And again, congrats to Sever Reece grabbing his first All Black hat trick against his home nation as well. That's a bit unfortunate. No mercy here. No. And like you tell me that another team would put over 50 on Fiji, even in one game, let alone back to back. I don't think there is a team that would do it to this Fiji outfit. And we saw this Fiji team beat France in Paris not too long ago.
They're a superb defensive outfit. They're becoming a very good defensive outfit. They're getting tidier. They're putting together strike plays. They're moving the ball very well. Like there's a lot to like about where Fiji's at, and they mixed it with the All Blacks for a time. But they were in the Lions' den really, and it wasn't going to go any other way for them. No. They need their main men back to mix it with the top teams. I think they still need Ranradra and Tuisova,
and just Body wasn't available either.
Body as well. They need game breaking impact in their back line, which they didn't quite have.
No, and it was unfortunate that pick fell to Vola in the end instead of maybe someone else who was a little bit more pace. Because he just didn't quite get it there. He got mowed down, and then similarly in the opening stanza they had a beautiful set piece move that resulted in Nadolo finding a little bit of space, and he's just a little bit slower than he used to be in the open space. He couldn't quite find the pass.
You nearly pick him at number 8 these days, Nadolo, wouldn't you? Because he's not really a winger anymore. It's a shame. Like he's really packed on the pounds, and like he's decided to become just monstrously heavy, and he's not as quick as he was. And he used to have these fantastic plays where because his skill set is off the charts.
Drop it on the toe,
that was
grubber,
the one, a little drop onto the toe, no look grubber and regather. He had all the plays on him. And these days he's still a mighty specimen and very skillful with his hands, not likely to drop a ball ever.
Yes, it's also true.
He's just a little off the pace of what he was at his peak, and he's an aged winger. This is what happens to wingers. They have expiry dates.
They do, and unlike 3 tries for Sever Reece, including 2 on that left wing traditionally, and then Will Jordan coming off his right wing to grab his obligatory try later on in the game. That guy can't stop scoring as well. Just very, very impressive. What other notes were there?
Linnert Brown and Havili getting a go at the centres.
Very positive centre
Havili
partnership.
Has that 12 jersey on lock anyway.
I think he does. He looks excellent in that channel.
Rico and maybe Linnert Brown might be the 2 in the other centre, but Havili seems
I think the other one they named Enor, but I think he's definitely playing fourth fiddle to those 2. He's the other centre in the squad. Other notes were Ardi Sevilla getting himself in hot water again for being caught without the gum shield and I do sympathise. You were mentioning it's a respiratory thing.
He has a breathing issue. He doesn't wear normal gum shields, so he has to get sort of one specially made, and he just clearly just finds them uncomfortable and can't stand them, and at any given opportunity is trying to sneak it off.
Now that being said, he did score a very physical perp and go over try, which maybe he had a gum shield in for.
They're my teeth. I'll let them.
All Blacks don't have toothless ice hockey player smiles tonight. No. He's landed himself in hot water for that again. I do sympathise. It's tough. There are people with obviously a respiratory issue. In this instance, you can have all kinds of oral things that make it uncomfortable to wear a gum shield, but it is a collision sport. It's a hitting sport, and you probably do need to put your gum shield in. I sympathise with both sides of this argument. The All Blacks don't want to have their players not wearing gum shields. You need to rep safety at all levels and all of this, and they're very much a grassroots up kind of institution, the All Blacks. So it is taboo. But I sympathise for Ardy. It can be uncomfortable, all right. But if he's going to keep perping Fijians, maybe he should have protection.
Yes. A rough enough result for Fiji, but plenty of positives to take for them. They're at the beginning of their journey under Vern Cotter, and yet they have started a few rungs up the ladder from where tier 2 teams normally start. They have all kinds of quality, and they're building towards a World Cup where they will be a matchup against whomever.
Well, they've already secured that automatic qualifying in that group of death in the last World Cup. And we were even saying in the context of like Georgia are coming for us at tier 2 level, they don't have the same tools that Fiji have to work with. Fiji's quality is just unquestioned, but they could do with a little bit of the organisation and disciplined hustle of the Georgians as well, which they're getting under Vern Cotter. It's a very exciting project. I'm really hopeful that they will be very, very competitive come this World Cup, and they'll be hunting for a quarter-final spot, which is where they've been before.
I was just looking it up. I'd forgotten the World Cup pool. They have Australia and Wales again, just as they had the last time. So it's another go at both of those teams.
And they on their day they can do that. Of
course they can.
Absolutely.
Of course they can. Ask 2007's Wales about it.
Yeah, indeed.
The Fiji rough day at the office, but nothing major to take from it. And my takeaway is that this All Black team are bloody good.
Yeah.
And
you can cool the jets on the Foster Gate and all this. Like, you tell me the other team that are going to put 60 on Fiji or put 50 on Fiji in back-to-back weeks.
Post Tri-Nations last year, I think we were a little sceptical of Foster, and we didn't think he was the right man. But when he started to turn it for me was when I saw an interview with him ahead of Super Rugby Aotearoa, and that's where obviously the talking point that I keep pulling up about skill sets and discipline comes up. But the fact that he was so clear in his messaging that like those were the two areas to work on, he's mentioned it to all his All Black teams. He wants it filtered through Aotearoa, and he wants them to be ready to deliver for the All Black jerseys. It was just a very confident, good interview, and it was like. I just thought it was correct. It was like, that's exactly what this team needs. Yeah, this team 100%. This team needs to completely focus on their skill set, and let's leave the technicalities to when they come. But let's make the All Blacks about being the All Blacks,
being
again.
the most skillful team in world rugby, which is what they want.
And I tell you what, as much as the Lions tour is the news this week, and the Lions game it soaks up everything. This Rugby Championship is going to be an absolute
looking forward to
4 great teams.
Yeah, the All Blacks playing in South Africa and all of this kind of stuff.
All Blacks are going to take on that Bok defence. The Bledisloe match coming up would whet the appetite. Yeah. And there's a 4th team in this who are no mugs.
Argentina, who've just beaten the Six Nations champs. Absolutely. We'll swing on to them as well because, 33-11. Wales taking an absolute pounding at the hand of the Pumas, well deserved. A series win with that comprehensive one. The Wales forward pack not up to it, with the notable exception of Moriarty, who was very gamely hustling when they were shy of all their men, and then when Wainwright went down 2 minutes into test 1, you're just going oh dear, these young Welsh cubs are going to struggle against these ferocious Pumas, and so it proved.
They couldn't stop them. They in moments in the build-up to the first try that I was talking about, where they managed to sit down the defence. They didn't do that often enough.
No.
Probably Thomas Williams needed to take on more responsibility as one of the more senior figures and really start whipping that ball. But in the main, what was happening was just on both sides of the ball, the loose forwards were just dominated. With Moriarty hustled his heart out and ended up kind of broken for it.
Yeah.
But Argentina, the back row that they have at the moment of Issa, Matera and
Bruni, and with Kramer in the lock too.
Yeah. It's a fabulous combination. And Bruni at 8 has given them a much better dimension.
He had probably my favourite of his performances in a Puma shirt, and he's had some dues. He hasn't had a bad one yet, but I think that one was my favourite.
He was great.
He was everywhere, particularly in that first half when the game was still in the balance. He was making some big plays, and then Matera crashing over for the cherry on top was definitely a telling kind of. That was a good little image for how this game went. He broke a couple of tackles at the line and went in, and it was raw.
It was all physicality. They wore down on the Welsh, and they didn't let them in. Apart from 1 or 2 moments when Wales got to the outside. Young Tom Rogers on the left wing didn't manage to deliver with his speed.
No,
the Argentines had a little more from than the Canadians.
He had a very bad day. He ended up being hauled out of there to Tom Rogers. It went from bad to worse to really, really calamitous by the end. He had a chance to take what could have been the only kind of life vest that you could have thrown to that drowning Wales team out there was if he had held that ball and gone in for that quick try instantly. So then they would have had 14 on the board. I think at that point they would have had the lead. So that would have needed to be the narrative, was them soaking the pressure and then being clinical. But when he turfed that, it kind of rippled through the team that they weren't going to get that many, and it also, like a guy on debut, it just kind of
they don't have that kind of depth either where they can really mix it. They're already very much a soak and strike kind of team, but when you take the heart and soul out of it. All of the lethal players out of the
Beard,
team.
Alan Wynne-Jones, Navidi.
Yeah, George North.
Tipperick,
The whole team is kind of gone, and Sheedy's form is out the window as well.
Yeah,
tell you that for nothing.
Terrible end to the season for what has been a very good.
And so too Jonathan Davis. To be honest with you, I wanted more from him. He was playing 12, and they needed to sit down the Pumas defense, and every carry that he made was just kind of off and slow, and even his passing. Like he had a good link play for in the build up to the try. But outside of that, he just didn't do enough for me. He needed to be a leader.
He was shipping it on without sitting anyone down quite often, for sure.
He just didn't look himself. Like at his best, he's so explosive, and he is a good link man, and he's got all the skills, and he was just looking slow out there and not great, and no match for the hungry Pumas, who do have a very, very good team, and especially they have a very, very good defense. It's almost nearly modelled on the All Blacks, but it's a little on the Springboks, I should say. But they hold their width a little more. They're a little less explosive off the line, but they are phenomenal in the contact. They are just brutalising the Welsh carriers and not letting them in. Yeah. They scramble just as well as the box. They have tremendous stick-to-itiveness even when they're coughing
they denied a few half breaks very well with their scramble D in both tests. Actually, that was a recurring theme, and they'll need to keep that going through Rugby Championship. And then also what we were asking for was them finding a little bit of their tempo, and they did build on their offensive acumen in this game. 33
their
points.
Red zone tempo was good, even though like they were winning contact, so it's easy. But they were quick. They were not
noticeably quicker, and that's why guys like Del Gee were getting on the ball, and like Maroney as well. You were starting to see those dangerous extremities being utilised by them.
The telepathy is not quite there. No. They're not quite as lethal as they once were in terms of the tracking lines and the link play. And honestly, some of the hands, like as much as we love Big Kramer in there for his defensive hustle,
he doesn't want.
He has a drop a game.
No, he wants to hit people with the ball. He doesn't want the ball in his hands. He wants that guy to have the ball in his hands so he can hit him.
Yeah, exactly. And when he has the ball, he short circuits because the guy with the ball is supposed to be the enemy, and now it's me, and I dropped it.
Yeah, something like that going on in his biomechanical head.
So they've been a little clunky at times, and they racked up 33 points. Honestly, in terms of the damage that they were inflicting on the Welsh pack, it could have and should have been more, especially by the end when they were just trampling through the scrum.
Yeah, it was
so
absolutely
meaty,
one-way traffic entirely.
They need a little bit more connectivity and clinicality on offense if they are going to mix it with sides like the Boks, who are playing a similar game, only they're bigger.
Exactly.
They
need to still have that defensive acumen, which is the building block of this game. The set piece and defense is what they've modelled it on since your man's come in. Ledesma and Cheika now adding that starting to see sprinklings of his influence in some of their little strike moves off line out, in some of their hands, in just the general tempo in the red zone. All of that greatly improved, but we'll have to improve more because, as you say, when they take on the Boks, they can't hope to be the bigger, meaner, more physical defensive pressure kind of team, because that's the Springboks. You're going to have to get those wingers on the board.
Play in different ways. Got to find other ways to get around teams, and they definitely have the talent to do it. And I think this was a great series for them in terms of building to the Rugby Championship. Coming into this series, they were coming off that ropey ass game against the Romanians.
It's true.
They were a little off in that first game. Obviously, they had the red card, but they still got the draw out of it. And then in the second game, they really started to put it together, and while it's not fully there,
to see what it could look like.
Right.
In patches, you saw what this Argentina side could be all about come World Cup time, and it looks very, very tasty. Certainly the talent pool is crazy, because as we were saying, like the whole back three division was basically gone, and it was a new back three, and they're all class. Like the depth is there, and the talent is very much there, and the physicality and the defence is already there.
Like in the look at Maroney again. Maroney is very physical in contact as well. He's not afraid to get involved from everywhere. Enjoyed his performance on the wing.
Coming force as well.
Yeah, Chocobaris is going to be in that jersey for a while in the centre, 12 or 13. He's a star.
Yeah,
he's a star.
Sanchez still kicking goals like the ageless man. Very impressive from the Pumas. From Wales' point of view, it was a disappointing end to an otherwise successful season.
It was a raggedy old
But Pivac was kind of taking it with a glimpse. Like some of his work-ons worked. Like the first try was a good positive. It was a good adjustment, as you were saying, to that pressure D. They just couldn't
find it again,
and they were outmatched and weary and heavy-legged by the end of the long season
they were
as well.
They were outmatched is the right word for it. They were up against the Pumas team. Like this Pumas team are class. No matter what happens in the Rugby Championship this year, but like I don't think they'll go winless. As good as the Wallabies, the Springboks, and the All Blacks are, I think they'll mix it. I think they're coming as far as the World Cup is concerned, and I think any Six Nations team, including the champions, need to have a full team to take them on.
True.
Like the B, like if Ireland's B team had to go at them, even England's B team in that raggedy showing against the US, they'd all have shipped an L to this Pumas team, looking dialed and very, very good.
And warming up for a big competitive rugby championship.
Also should be mentioned that game was played in 30 degrees Celsius heat.
What's going on in Wales? We were covering the under-20s in Cardiff as well, and it was just always sunny as well. You must be having a grand old summer.
It's a grand old summer here as well, to be fair. We're a stone's throw away from them, really. But it's just been very, very hot, and it was very hot in that game, and that probably didn't suit the Welsh either. The Pumas just a little more used to that kind of weather.
Yeah, no, for sure. Especially again, it's end of season. You're already the physically smaller team. Oh, it's tough when you take a few contacts. If you're on debut and you just turf to try,
as well,
and now there's a Puma running at you. Oh no, it was an ugly, a scuttery end to an otherwise successful season for the Six Nations champs. But congratulations to Argentina getting their season off to a winning start as well, and it's just between them and the Wallabies getting good series wins, it just tees up that Rugby Championship very impressively, and the All Blacks looking imperious too.
It truly does. There are other games to get to, just to briefly mention. Samoa got another win over Tonga.
This time I did do aggregate. 79-28, because aggregate was actually how it was scored overall, because it was a 2-match series. The winner of which was Samoa, and that means they have become the first qualifiers for the Rugby World Cup 2023 in that qualification background.
Good on them.
Yeah, congratulations, well deserved. They were thoroughly the better team. It was another one, like not dissimilar to that that All Blacks Fiji thing, where it took on a similar dynamic to the first game as well. Tonga struck first. They started really, really well, exited well, got themselves a penalty, and then made a very cheap error off the ensuing restart, and then just invited Samoa back in. So it was a ding-dong battle for around 30 minutes before Samoa kind of finally stuck the knife in with a few slicker back moves. They look a nice, slick team, Samoa, and then in the breaking of the game was in the second half. They kind of soaked a massive period of Tongan pressure. The Samoans kind of dialed out for a little bit and allowed Tonga to kind of play their game. There were a few sloppy Samoan penalties that you do sometimes see when the pressure gets on, but it was under no pressure. But then they managed to get one big turnover steal under their sticks that kind of broke Tongan hearts, and you could see everyone dejected, and then they went up and kind of ran the score up a little.
Yeah, and their capacity to do that is encouraging. It's easy to forget that Samoa, just for many years now, have not been able to put up scores like 40 and 35 against anybody that isn't levels beneath them. They have been this series, while against a Tongan team that were pretty raggedy, is very much an encouraging blueprint. They're building obviously now towards a World Cup pool, I believe, with Argentina, England and Japan. It's a fun pool, but obviously they're going to be up against it going into that. But I think the green shoots of optimism are there, where they've got skill set and talent, and they're trying to move the ball. It's a different kind of Samoa to the one we've been seeing that's just all about the hard hitting. They're looking a little slighter than they usually look, but also fit and sharp. And moving the ball very well, and I've enjoyed some of their scores that they've managed to rack up in the last couple of weeks, and
a few of the tries they grabbed towards the end were absolute peaches. The little they managed to get a maul going in the middle third, and then dropped it back and dabbed a little chip over the top to perfectly find the 13. That was a game killing score at that time, and then they were by the end they were really playing some globetrotter stuff and throwing the ball around with all kinds of reckless intent,
as they
finding
did
a
last
lovely
week.
little touch finder, and then stealing the line out and going again and finding another killer try to pad the scoreline. It was all hungry stuff from the Samoans, even though they'd already well and truly qualified by that point. So it's good, exciting young side. Really like the kind of brand that they're playing. From the Tongans point of view, it's unfortunate. They do have a match coming up against the Cook Islands, which we'll look at as well. They're not out yet, but it's just been an unfortunate series in that they couldn't get all their players on. They couldn't quite get their preparation right, as is always the case, and they weren't at the level to compete with this Samoan team, which is a shame, because it is a classic and they know they can be at a level to compete with them.
There have been years gone by where Tongans are much better than the Samoans, and they show it on the field, and I'm sure these two will meet many a time between now and the World Cup. But for Tonga, the mission goes on.
It does. Yeah, well, I'm just going to make brief mention of the two quotes that came post-game from both sets of coaches before looking at that, because this is kind of what we're talking about. Tongan rugby coach Tote Kefu was saying there's a few guys who have to go back to work. They can only take 2 or 3 weeks off, so that's pretty important. We'll let them go back to work and we'll find more players, which is not ideal, obviously. And then Samoan's point of view saying having regular access to our players, it's very different for us pulling players from all over the world, having access that we can assemble as an international test side and play those regular test matches will go a long way.
Yeah, and the Samoans have had a bit of that. They haven't had everyone available to them. There's guys they'd love to bring in, but they had that sequence of games, two games against the Maori and 2 games against Tonga, where they had the squad together, and by the end they were looking polished enough unit.
It makes such a difference. You can notice that with Argentina when we talk about them jumping around, jet lag, or kind of globe trotting through, jumping around off on a plane, doing 7 hours of travel this way, 10 hours that way, and then they presented a slightly jet lagged, footsore kind of leggy team on the pitch. Whereas when they're in camp for either World Cup or the Tri-Nations last year, just makes such a difference, and that's tenfold for a side the scale of a Samoa or a Tonga, where it's a smaller base.
Yeah, they need to be tight knit, and they need to be on top of each other, and they need to know what each other are about, and what they're doing. They need to be perfect if they want to mix it with the Tier 1 nations. And I don't know that Samoa are there yet, but I definitely think a positive series for them. From Tonga's point of view, obviously things are pretty negative looking ahead to that game.
Which we have Tonga v the Cook Islands, which is coming up this Saturday as well. And the Cook Islands in a similar kind of boat in terms of they're very, very small island nation with only a few players to pick from, and very tough to get them kind of whipped into shape to play these test matches. They did have a warm-up game last weekend against the New Zealand under-20s, which they lost 73-0, and that was the Cook Islands preparation for this one. So both sides coming in with a little downtrodden lack of momentum. You would make the Tongans firm favourites, just
overwhelming favourites. Like the Cook Islands losing to the under-20s by that much, just presumably because that was as much points as the under-20s could score against traffic cones in that time.
Pretty much.
It's
tough, as you were saying. It's like a lot of hungry young 19-year-old New Zealanders primed to go into professional ranks and go and join the Hurricanes or the Highlanders and stuff, versus every man from the Cook Islands who can hold a rugby ball, so it's going to be tough.
I mean, they have some rugby tradition out in the Cook Islands, and they're not, I wouldn't disparage them at all, but they're not at the level of a serious team. No. You don't have many pros gallivanting the world from the Cook Islands, and I would imagine that Tonga, by hook or by crook, whatever players they manage to assemble, will have too much for this game. And if they do win this game, the winner of this game goes into a playoff with the winner of the Asia competition.
Asia Pacific, I think, is it? Or
I think it's Asia Pacific's the name of the qualifier.
Right. Okay.
So this is Pacific. This is sort of the Pacific half of that.
Right.
They play the winners of the Asia Rugby Championship, which I believe is contested between Hong Kong, South Korea and Malaysia.
Right. Usually Hong Kong
come out of that. So one expects that Tonga are going to set themselves up here with a game against Hong Kong, the winner of which will become Asia Pacific one.
Yes.
Who will get into the World Cup that way, and then the loser of which will go into the repechage for the final qualifying place. So obviously massive game for the Cook Islands and a massive opportunity for them, and it's good. As bad as a 73-0 loss is, it's good that they got a game in before this big game. But that's definitely a game of intrigue on this weekend. If the balance might be a little one-sided in favour of the Tongans.
I'm looking at the Tongans. That's going to be this Saturday. Like all others, it's on 24th at Navigation Homes Stadium in Pekakui. Pekakui.
I do not know where Pukekohe is. Where's that?
Can't pronounce it. I think it is in Tonga.
Nuku'alofa.
Which is just going to be a very interesting game. Good advertisement for Islander rugby.
That is a town in the North Island of New Zealand.
Oh, it's in
Pukekohe.
We are still in New Zealand. Any of our Kiwi commenters give us a little phonetic pronunciation job of that, because that's a toughie.
It's in the Auckland region. It's near enough Auckland.
Yeah, that actually makes sense, because they were playing in they're obviously the All Blacks both are kind of hosting. They're kind of doing their hosting with the mosting, which is very nice of them to get these Islander teams in to get these clutch games kind of done, because it's been a bit of a scramble between all the kind of Rugby European qualifications, all the qualification processes from across the globe have been delayed through COVID, and it's as tough as it is to get Lions tours organised at the top end of the game. imagine trying to kind of be the bus driver or be the team coach of the Cook Islands trying to scramble World Cup qualification things going.
It's real. Like, I mean, they got to get all these qualifiers played and these games resolved, and you know that much of it's going to take place next year. But we'll be with you anyway every stage of the Rugby World Cup qualifiers as they go, and we chalk teams off the list.
Yes, it'll be nice, and congratulations again to Samoa, who are the first ones in that race. It's a very, very competitive race, and it's very valuable for all of these teams because the carrot is huge. The money is divided equally in terms of participation in the Rugby World Cup, which means it's kind of like less than you might expect for like an England or a France, but a huge chunk of change if you're a Tonga or a Samoa. So yeah, congratulations to Samoa getting in, and good luck to both these teams.
Absolutely. There are other Tier 2 matters to look to. The Rugby Europe Championship had another game at the weekend. We bigged it up as a huge game. It was a huge game.
It was excellent
in
game.
Russia. Russia took on Portugal. Final score, Russia 26, Portugal 49
points, and their
good.
first win in Russia in I think 11 years, they were saying. Awesome.
They raced to a 17-0 lead.
Slowed down a little towards the end of the first half.
And ended up only winning the half 20-14, and like it was a pretty picture. They scored some lovely tries, they played at a great tempo, they caught the Russians, but that was very much a not unfamiliar picture for the Portuguese. Only a year ago or 6 months ago maybe that would have been it for them. Their initial bubble would have burst, but they've really added a stick-to-itiveness and a fitness level to their game.
Well, they came out of the sheds with a new verve and tempo. They looked like the game was starting over again. They've recognised that there are lulls in their game, but they're timing them well. They're getting some good game management. Like Marques is such a savvy player as well. Like some of the penalties they kicked were just on point to punish sloppy Russian indiscipline.
Marques runs the game very well, and he's facilitating the game of Portela at 10, who's getting better every week and has a fantastic skill set to him.
The first try for Appleton's try, the little take it to the line and out the back pass. So good.
It was a speed. It was a kind of, as we said, which was just that the Russians, if Portugal got it right, the Russians wouldn't be able to move at their speed. They're playing at a quicker game than any side perhaps has ever played in this competition, and they're punishing the slow teams for being slow.
Which is a great picture. Scoring 49 points on them in their home turf because it's sunshiny and you're slow.
Absolutely. I mean, what a fun game this was. Portugal sticking it to them. Jose Lima getting on the board.
Lovely
Appleton, both centres.
It was the centres turn.
And both flankers as well getting on the board.
The wingers were all the story last week when they were running in like 5 tries and 3 tries, whereas no, this time both centres on the board, flankers on the board. It was a bit more kind of down the middle was where the line, because the Russians, to be fair to them, were trying to fold quite. They were trying to stretch the field on the defence, which just left that room for that straightened line from the 10 that worked every time.
And what about that? That first try, as you say, just playing off the adjustments your opponents make. Where Russia, they are slow, but Portela straightens the line and shapes to give it to the inside winger, which he's been doing all year, and naturally the Russian lock in front of him just veers that way because he's seen a bit of tape on them, and then Portela's gone in behind him and he still feeds the blindside
same winger. Man, you're just completely out of the play.
Exactly. So it was glorious to watch the Portuguese do their thing as they continued to do, getting better up front as well, and very encouraging. But they were trampled on at times by a hustling Russian team who crucially did manage to score a late try, which prevented Portugal from getting the winning bonus point.
Which could be crucial because, as we said, it's a 2-year tournament effectively. Like Portugal with that win, I think, have secured solo second. Maybe not. No, I think Romania can nick it on
with a bonus point win over the Netherlands would go level with them.
Right.
Now solo second is not.
No, it's not a thing.
It's not a thing because there's a whole other year to go in this competition. It's half time.
It's all just aggregate points is what's counting. So it's like as many points as you can accrue and as many points as you can deny your direct opponents, in this case Russia are in direct competition with both Romania and Portugal, and to lesser extent Spain, for that Europe 2 spot, to be honest. And it's all about next year, and Russia showed good game management and good savvy that you just have to admire. Like as much as they were
way back into the game,
as much as they were the slower team that were completely blitzed in the opening quarter, that were just outmatched and no match for them, they still ended the half only 6 points down. They still found that try at the death. They managed to slow it down at key moments. They still managed to milk good penalties.
They're still very physical. They have a decent kicking game. They're not all lost at all.
No.
And we saw all of those good qualities at the World Cup. At their best, they can be a very good spoilery outfit.
It's true.
They won't won't ever make it a step above that until they can speed up a little.
Shout out to the Portuguese hooker as well, though, Mike Tadger, for just a phenomenal play for one of the flankers tries, where it was just off the base of the line out, dummy on the inside, show and go through the contact and around the back offload. Oh, delicious! I thought you were looking at Dane Coles for a second.
Dummies it one way, steps through, gives it the other way. Yeah, it was a lovely little slick play from him.
Yeah,
and a deserved victory for Portugal. It was very, very impressive. And then we do have another game going on this weekend.
We do,
The Netherlands are back in action. They take on Russia.
Yes.
They're still winless and pointless, unfortunately, the Netherlands.
Sadly true, despite their 4-try showing against Portugal. That was no good for them. They do have home field advantage. It's going to be in the, the
National Rugby Centre in
Amsterdam. That's right, on Saturday, July 24th as well. And home field advantage in that there are fans. There's bouncy castles. It's a good little stadium, but also the long chips are in the in-goal areas are huge. In that
that's
ground.
right.
So
they
scored a couple of tries from little jabs in from the red zone. So that's a legit play. Russia, it's there for both teams, but Russia do tend to favour the kind of Exeter approach of kind of pick and jam close to the red zone. So it'll be curious to see if they try and avail of that space in behind. But I know that if the Dutch get up that close, they probably will.
Yeah, the Dutch will see this as an opportunity. They took a pasting at the hands of Portugal and weren't able
Georgia as well.
Yeah, they weren't able to impose themselves physically on Portugal at all. Now, listen, Portugal and Georgia are the toughest two games of the competition.
Yeah, well, they're sitting first and second in the table right now with good reason.
Yeah, it's a rough start for the Dutch, and they haven't looked impotent. They haven't at times been able to
they
move
scored
the ball.
Brilliant tries against both Georgia and Portugal,
and they've moved the ball quickly at times, and they've hit some space at times.
Geordie Hop can take a try on the wing.
Yeah, absolutely. So they can move the ball. They can definitely move quicker than this Russian team, and that's the way they'll have to do it. They'll have to be a bit quicker. They'll have to be quite clinical. They have to take that Portuguese model to heart and try and get around them. Russia are very, very physical and will likely have the edge in the contacts. But if they can hustle hard enough on defence and manage to match up to those Russians and keep the score down a little bit and then nick some tries, who knows? You got to get in.
Very true. Yeah. The other thing I've highlighted is just the kicking game, because I think that has been a noticeable difference in quality against both Georgia and Portugal, which are two different sides to lose to. But in both, there were a few kicks out on the full. They were really costly, like things that you might have got away with in the division below that you just won't at this level. And Russia particularly do dial into those kinds of plays. If you're kicking it out on the full and giving them ins into your territory, they will take that. Their pack love that. So a little better control of, just to see them not even control but contest territory a bit more. There is a little bit of naivety in some of their play in their own 22. That's obviously it comes with experience and exposure to tougher tests, but they've kind of shot themselves in the foot a few times or invited pressure on themselves when they don't need to. So just a little bit more from the halfbacks in terms of kicking themselves into the game, and then they will be in a game, because Russia are slow to do anything, including build a score. So if they can commit seppuku themselves, they can kind of stay in the game for a while.
No question. And this is a big game for them. Getting a win of any kind would be huge to avoid the relegation. They don't realistically look like World Cup contenders, whereas Russia would still consider themselves firmly in that fight.
They would, despite being having lost ground on the other
that opening day win against Romania has aged very well for them, and that is still their best performance of the season, and they'll be thankful for it, because obviously they've had defeats now to Georgia and Portugal where they haven't managed to get a bonus point, which will concern them. They've now played 3 games and they haven't added any points to that total that they had before. So the games in hand are running out on them. They have 2 games left in the championship, one here against the Dutch, one here and one against Spain,
which has to be rescheduled.
Yes, indeed. I think they'll play that in November now.
So
it's a must win for sure. If they get the win, that's fine. They're still in the mix. They're a point behind Romania, who will edge ahead when they beat the Dutch as well. But they'll have that game against Spain, which if they win that, could put them right back in the mix.
Sure,
and a max out here would also be a point against the field, given Portugal failed to max out. And if they could get on top of the Dutch physically and be defensively miserly, be physical and just not offer the Dutch anything, and then nick the 3-try advantage that you need, it could be a sort of an uglier way to actually achieve the bonus point than the frustrating failure to achieve it from Portugal despite scoring a million tries, because they shipped loads as well.
That's true. They all count. There's no room on the table for remarks. It's only the points that matter at the end of the day. And advantage Portugal in that regard, but Russia are definitely still in the hunt, and it starts by being authoritative here against
physical,
a Dutch side
strong,
that they are stronger than.
Yeah, get your red zone offense clinical, kick your kicks, get on top of the Dutch and start to
guys like Grezhev from 8, their back row are all kind of rangy physical ball carriers, and they'll fancy getting the upper hand both at set piece and just in the loose carry against a Dutch side that don't love defending bigger, stronger teams by the looks of them. They do try, and they are game for the whole. Like, they're a very good value, to be honest. I enjoy watching them. All of their games so far have been good watches, good fun. But from a personal point of view, from your team point of view, they haven't registered the point yet, so it's still a struggle. They are in direct competition with Spain, I think, because if they can nick a win against anyone, even Spain, they will get themselves ahead of having to play off again and get them secured in, consolidate their position. It's always the first primary job of a team coming up from the division below in any sport is just consolidate the promotion. You need to try and secure that. Don't be in the playoff next year.
Absolutely, So how do you think this one's going? You think Russia comfortably?
I think Russia comfortably. I'm going to hope that we see the best Dutch showing yet, and they actually manage to nick a losing bonus point out of this one.
I was going to call that. I think Russia, while good and physical, are not good at padding the score necessarily.
No, they're neither. They're not as clinical in terms of like just scoring against you as Portugal were, and nor are they quite as bullying and physical as Georgia were. Yeah. So in terms of exposure, the Dutch have had two really trial by fires kind of thrown in at the deep end. Russia, I think, are a step down in both game plans in terms of they do have a physicality, but it's not the Georgian physicality, so they shouldn't be shocked.
They should be comfortable enough. I'd say
if not comfortable, they shouldn't be surprised.
21-16, I would say to Russia.
That's a good kind of
call. It'll be a tight enough game, but the Russians will take it.
Yeah, no, I do think the Russians will win, but I'll go for that. I'll agree with you on that one. I'm hoping the Dutch get themselves a table point.
What do you guys think is going to happen? Let us know below, and be sure that you can tune into the game. This, I believe it's Saturday.
Yeah. RugbyEurope.eu.
RugbyEurope.eu is right. It takes place in the afternoon anyway, and we'll post the link down in the description for those watching the shorter vid.
Absolutely.
We're going to also touch base with the Rugby Africa Cup, which is still one of the cooler logos in World Rugby.
It's true. It's true.
That wrapped up for the year. It was just sort of the curtain raiser. There was one game since we last chatted to you where Algeria pulled off an upset win against Uganda, which actually ended up kicking out Ghana, who had pulled off that great win with that coast-to-coast try we were talking about last week. Yeah, and they were so buzzing, the Ghanaian rugby fans. That was obviously
a really good competitive group that they were in, because like a few of them weren't, and like Burkina Faso and Zimbabwe both got a walkover because Tunisia pulled out, I believe,
and Burkina Faso, who will now be through with the walkover, lost in their game against Zimbabwe. 101-3, I believe was the score.
Yes, so you know that's
they were wise to kick that 3-pointer early.
They were. Anyway. I'm just glad they got that on the board anyway. But so they're going to be through despite the fact that coast to coast Ghana will be out. But that's a shame. But we do have quarterfinals finalised. That Rugby Africa 2021 is finished, and it's going to be 2022 when these 8 teams meet. Quarterfinal 1 is Namibia v Burkina Faso, which is impossible to see going any way other than a Namibia win.
Yes, that's a lovely cushy draw for Namibia in the opening game. But there are other good games. Zimbabwe themselves, who are a good team, taking on Cote d'Ivoire,
who beat Namibia earlier on. That's a juicy game as well.
Potentially a good game. Senegal play Algeria, and Uganda play Kenya in
also
a game with decent rugby pedigree as well. So those games will be taking place next year, all vying it out, duking it out for the one World Cup spot
available at the end of it. So it's a really good competitive kind of contest. Like
I love it. There's a golden ticket at the end of it all, and Namibia win it every time. But it's I think they had a loss so far in this, so
they did.
Who knows?
Cote d'Ivoire, Uganda, Kenya, all of these teams have decent rugby pedigree, so it's a competitive kind of contest. I don't think Burkina Faso will win it ultimately. But Algeria.
The smart money is still on Namibia.
Still ultimately Namibia coming good, but we'll find out that next year. But we're going to park that, I suppose, for this year and move on from Africa. We have other World Cup intrigue going on in South America.
That's right.
We've been covering this as well. Obviously, we had kind of the round robin going on between Brazil, Chile, and Uruguay. Chile got the opening win 23-13 over Brazil, but Uruguay scraped home last week. 15-10 they beat Chile. It was no one was anticipating it being as tight as that.
I mean, they were behind at half time. There was pressure on them. I was watching the stream that the SAR app had up, and like we mention this point every time, but with good reason, they should be shot for how they try and handle this. I mean, just stream it on YouTube, please, because they can't stream it on their app. Their app can't do it.
Yeah.
So it ends up just being this choppy, terrible stream, and no watching of the game for me, really, except that it did wake up enough for me to see the decisive score when Uruguay did actually kick to the corner in a clutch moment. Went for it and found the try. I don't think it was Kessler, no, but it was a great clutch moment that got them the dub. Yeah. And actually Chile went up the other end and tried the same thing and then were repelled,
which is also key.
Was kind of a telling decisive sequence in the second half.
But
in the main, Uruguay a little stuck in the mud, but challenged or met all the way by this Chilean team who are no mugs.
That's true. It was actually Kessler who touched down.
Was it?
Yeah, and he's just now one behind Keith Wood in the international try-scoring hooker brigade. Slow down.
I think Ronan Kelleher will overtake them all.
Yeah, the try-scoring hookers are becoming a more common phenomenon, but a pretty pivotal score from him. And Uruguay survive a scare, but you know what else is just watch out USA and Canada, because South American rugby is looking pretty good right now, and although these guys haven't come through just yet, that was a scare for Uruguay. They can't rest on their laurels either. They will be beaten if they come in undercooked.
Neither can the US of A, who need to get things right under Gary Gold. You know, they've got all this good stuff going for them with the MLR. But if Chile are able to do that to Uruguay, there's no reason to think they wouldn't be able to do it to America.
Yeah.
So if America end up in a matchup with Uruguay and then come out the wrong end of it and then have a clutch game against Chile, they are by no means guaranteed to make it to the World Cup, which would be a horrorous step back for them if they were to fail to make the World Cup.
And meanwhile, Canada should be very scared, because
Canada are nearly, in my book, they're nearly almost dead certs not to make the World Cup at this stage.
Yeah,
they probably won't make the repechage.
Yeah.
They'll have a game against Chile for the repechage.
Yeah, and on current evidence, like Chile getting 5-point loss to Uruguay, very, very respectable. I'd make them slight favourites at the moment based on current form as well. So that's a potential warning shot fired throughout this whole kind of America's rugby qualifying series, that Chile are here to play, and you don't be sleeping on them. But in the meantime, this weekend we do have another game. It's going to be on Sunday, and it's going to be Uruguay versus Brazil. And Brazil probably due for a bit of a backlash here in terms of Uruguay. Uruguay will be...
it's win at all costs for Uruguay. A win here gets them top of the round robin, which puts them in the shootout for America's one, which is a lovely game to be in at this stage of the qualifying.
It's as good as they can do. It's like Samoa have already qualified. It's putting themselves in the driver's seat is getting a comfortable win here and being
and
under
watch
control.
the US and Canada duke it out over their 2-game series to see who gets to play Uruguay to go to the World Cup. It's a wonderful ticket to have, and it will also guarantee them another shot. Even if they lose.
Conversely for Brazil, I think this is do or die. If they don't win this, I think they're completely done.
That's right. They're out of proceedings if they lose. So they're on the hill, and that'll be interesting to see if they can pull anything out of the fire, having held Chile themselves in an uglier game to just a 10-point defeat. So
which just means it's competitive.
They're getting to know each other, and they're getting to know each other's strengths and weaknesses, and managing to frustrate each other, and it's creating just close, good, dynamic
kind of
games.
interpro style games. Derby games that we have down in South America now, which is very exciting. But that game happens again at Montevideo, which is just the South American mecca for rugby right now. It's Estadio Charrua, as it always is. That's going to be kicking off at 4:30 on Sunday this weekend. And as you say, you can try and watch it on their frustrating app, but hopefully they'll just
they won't
stream it all on Facebook or YouTube.
If you're out here in the wilderness. In South America, it's televised,
ESPN, I think,
which is good. But from our point of view, we're stuck with their app, which is horrific.
It's not growing the game. It's not sharing the game.
No, it's not sharing. Share your game. You've got a great game. Share it with us.
I really like watching Uruguay play.
Exactly. It'd be great to watch more of them. We watch a lot of the European Tier 2 stuff. It'd be great to get our eyes in South America, because from what we've seen, rugby is exploding over there.
Yeah, for sure.
Now, there is something else that we have to address
and
this
now
week.
For something a little different, we have the Olympics in rugby.
Yes, the second ever iteration of the sevens in the Olympics.
Yeah.
This is very, very exciting. I'm delighted that this is going ahead, and this is going to be the huge rugby story of the week after the Lions. We've got a whole week of
sevens
class sevens tournament in which a medal winner will be decided, and it's a mad old dynamic. delighted to say that Ireland are in there among the 12 teams. The Ireland men's team managed to get in, and for well worth their place. They have an electric superstar in Jordan Conroy.
They do. They have a really good rugby player in Terry Kennedy. They have a lot of good qualities all over. They have the best goal kicker in the game in Billy Dartis going on right now. So I'm excited for their chances. But it's 12 really good quality teams. We have the pools here. Obviously, it's going to start with the men. It starts this Monday, I believe. The men's tournament kicks off Monday, June 26th, and wraps up then with the bronze and gold finals on that Wednesday. So it's just 3 days, and then on Thursday through Saturday, the women are playing as well. So just starting with the men, we have Pool A is New Zealand, Australia, Argentina and South Korea. Then Pool B is Fiji, Great Britain, Canada and Japan. And Pool C is South Africa, USA, Kenya and Ireland. It's all very good teams, to be honest. And I think it's such a tight format. Like, there's 12 games on day one, so you play 2 of your pool games on day one. It's going to come down to who's hot or who's not. Like, it is,
and it's different even from a normal tournament which takes place over 48 hours. It's a little more spaced out, so there isn't those 3 tests in a day dynamic, which I think, from my own biased point of view, probably suits the Irish boys. It's less likely for them to get gassed, etc. It's very, very difficult to know exactly what's going to come of this. You've never had a sevens competition where the teams are going in more cold and blind than this, because they haven't been able to do the Sevens World Series.
It's true. It's very affected by
COVID. It's a real shame. It's one of the best sporting formats in any sport in the world, and it just so happens to be drastically affected by COVID.
It's totally non-conducive with the COVID world. They're literally hopping from plane to plane into amazing location to amazing location, going to Vegas one week, Dubai the next, they're jumping around the globe,
and all mixing together, and it's just awesome. And it's important to remember, as we try and emerge from the pandemic, that the things that have become wrong are so right, and sevens is one of them. It's going to be great to see it back in action, and it's hard to know. Are the Springboks going to be the guys? Are Fiji going to be the guys? That Fiji squad is looking pretty good. The usual characters, Jerry Tuai, only with a Ranradra dropped in there.
Parachuted in there to help them out, as he was the 4 years ago. The Fiji are incumbent medal winners, having won their first ever Olympic medal, I believe, in the sevens 4 years ago. So they are going to be defending this tournament. But it really is anyone up for grabs. Like, the USA have quality players. We know Carl Niles, Perry Baker, serious wheels on the USA team. Similarly, Kenya are no mugs. They've been a coming force for many years.
They kind of tapered off recently, having been in very explosive fashion.
Collins and Gira got a little bit older and lost a step of pace, and so they did as well. New Zealand never to be written off in the sevens as well.
Far
always
from
competitive. Great Team GB, because England are bloody good as well, and Wales and Scotland have decent players. So Team GB should add up to a good collection of sevens players. Australia as well, Argentina, all dangerous. So It's really who hits the ground running and who shows form. This is why I kind of like our chances, because Ireland had to go through that rigmarole of qualifying in the tournament in wherever it was, Monaco, a few weeks ago, where they just beat that France team. So they're probably a little more match sharp than all these other teams, because all of the sevens heads have been scattered to the 4 wins. Some of them being MLR, being picked up on temporary contracts. Some of them popped up in that Bermuda Tens tournament that happened during the pandemic.
The future of rugby.
No, it's not at all. The past of rugby now. So a lot of these guys are, while we know them and we've watched the sevens before, it's just going to be who takes the field in a sharp and ready way on day one, and doesn't, because you can't win the tournament on the first day, but you can kind of lose it for yourself.
Oh, of course you can. The way it is. Of course you can. So who hits the ground running? It's going to be a fun dynamic, but definitely these are just going to be great games to watch. The Japanese time zone isn't too conducive to watching Ireland.
No.
I think we kick off at 3 a.m. on either Monday. I think it's the Monday.
Yeah.
And then 10 a.m. I'll get the 10 a.m. one in.
Yes.
But the 3 a.m. one, not so much.
I think 3 a.m. one is us against South Africa is our first one, very, very early. And then later on, I think we have the USA later that day.
Oh, jeez, that's a fun 2 games
tough
start.
And then Kenya plus
the
whatever
qualifying. I mean, we like our chances until we lose those first 2 games.
If you lose those 2 games, you're done
it's
anyway.
Over.
Like your chances in that as it stands now, before a ball is kicked, we could win the thing.
Yeah, 2 minutes into game one could be a different story
over already. Yeah,
I don't know who I like for the winnings of it. I'd love to see our boys go well. I think Jordan Conroy is a superstar. I think we can. Terry Kennedy's an excellent player, and they just have a really good dynamic as a squad. So I'm not going to write our boys off at all.
No.
Team GB are not to be underestimated either. They're well put together for us, and will be in the mix for the medals. And Fiji, the reigning champs.
I'm pretty much ready to say I don't think Korea will medal. That's the only certainty
that's as far
I have.
as we're going.
Yeah.
There's also the women's tournament, which begins a little afterwards.
Yeah, that begins on Thursday, I think, or is it?
Yeah.
Or no, begins on Friday actually.
Begins on Friday
and ends on Sunday. So there's
nice.
a little gap.
And the 12 teams involved are New Zealand, Russia, Great Britain, Kenya.
That's Pool A.
Then there's Canada, France, Fiji, and Brazil.
Pool B.
And Australia, USA, China, and Japan.
And Pool C.
Yeah, good diversity to that list. A few non-traditional rugby nations, and it should be a good battle over there as well.
That's true. Yeah, the women's sevens is another growing sport.
They're
as well.
great. They're great to watch the sevens games. I wouldn't claim the same expertise that we have in watching normal rugby, but they're just fantastic to watch.
Yeah.
Free flowing, space attacking, speedy, class rugby with a
some
wonderful atmosphere.
Cool technical elements. Like I like the way the guys ruck. They have to keep their feet, but it's normally only one player in the ruck.
Yeah, it's a wrestling match in there.
Grappling thing. The lineouts, the dynamics of shortened lineouts and shortened scrums. Some teams are really good at it. Others kind of don't prioritize it. The idea of the drop kick, the drop kick is hugely dialed for Billy Daragh is a great proponent of it. But then you see Fiji play, and they make it not about that, so they don't even worry about it. Like unless they score under the posts, they don't tend to get the conversion because they just kind of chip it and drop.
The restarts is where the drop goals are so important, though. One of the great dynamics of sevens rugby is that when you score, you kick the restart, which allows you a huge element of control. In theory, it's because possession's so important in the game that you want to give the team who didn't score the advantage of possession. But with modern restarts,
if you get enough hang time and you get a tall man up there, you can win that ball back.
And you can own the ball for the whole game.
The only way I see us beating Fiji is if we score, recover, and don't give them the ball.
Yeah, exactly right. Exactly right. So it's just there's a lot of fun to this, and it's going to be very, very exciting to see our great sport, or at least some iteration of it, at the Olympics.
And it did wonders for the sport 4 years ago. You see the growth in the game in the US since, because it's an Olympic sport. It thrusts these eyeballs in, and obviously you see teams like Russia in the women's game as well, China in the women's game. These are like Olympic juggernauts that are now taking an interest in rugby because it's an Olympic sport. So that's just exciting for the growth of the game. It's another avenue for more eyeballs on rugby.
Absolutely, no question. So that was the Olympics. We're also going to look.
Ireland.
Come on, Ireland is right. We're also going to look at club footy, and the main story this week is actually in America.
It is
the only story in club rugby. The playoffs are finally happening. We have the Eastern and Western Conference finals, or the ML or semi-finals
if you're a more rugby traditionalist and less American parlance.
Yeah, everybody's a champion. You get divisional champs and conference
champions. A big thing.
It is. Yeah. And we've got for the Eastern, for all the Eastern marbles, Rugby ATL Atlanta taking on Rugby United in New York. That's I should say Rugby United are in New York, but that game is in Atlanta.
It is.
And they won the home advantage. That is Saturday, 8 p.m. Eastern time kickoff. So that would be late at night in our part of the world at 1 a.m.
But available to be watched live or replayed on the Rugby Network as well. Which is just a great resource.
Fun game. Both of those teams loving the attack and footy. New York, a cracking team themselves. They had that game against NOLA last week when NOLA actually, they won the game in the end.
They did.
So they 35-32.
That was it.
But New York were in well enough in control for most of it and got to their 4 tries, which saw them home. And they have Andy Ellis, for old Crusaders fans, steering the ship at scrum half, and they are not a bad team at all.
He drives a good tempo. Would you believe?
Both of these teams play at a lovely tempo. I expect this will be a lovely match to watch. ATL against New York.
I'd make ATL slight favourites, just given home advantage and the way
and
the season's
gone.
They
played probably the sharper rugby. But I wouldn't write off Andy Ellis's charges.
No, not at all. I think it's finals footy again, so anything can happen. The Western Conference final as well, we have the LA Giltinis, the high-flying superstars of LA, taking home advantage at the Coliseum against the Utah Warriors, the very impressive Utah Warriors, who are quite physical as well as a side. And we had a cold open to this last week. One of the last regular season game for both of these teams was against each other last weekend, and Utah won it 34-29.
Late Mike Teo try ended up being the last score. The whistle just ended the ding dong battle that was that game.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, it was a bit of fun the week in advance. I don't think LA showed their hand too much.
Didn't.
There was no Gitto. There was no.
I don't think there was Ashley Cooper either. No,
it was a little bit. There was none of their usual back row names either.
No.
So they were a little bit short of their main cast, and it'll be definitely a tougher challenge for Utah. But I think this is a really fun game. I've enjoyed watching Utah all season. I love the way they work. I love Mikey Teo slotting in at first receiver.
Yeah.
I love their two wingers, Cruz and Whippy.
Yeah.
They're just quick. That whole back three has a good quick vibe to it. They can score and take tries when they need to, and they're nice and physical as well.
Yeah.
So this is going to be another fun game.
It's true.
The MLR has become a home for exciting rugby
It
and
has.
Aussie rugby attributes.
Aussie influence, which is a large part thanks to the Giltinis, who started this season by putting down that marker, and other teams have adjusted, and that's why we have this Final Four are all good teams that play attacking rugby.
Footy.
And I don't necessarily make the Giltinis favourite to come out on top of it at all, although I think they have the most points going in of the table. But like they've shown in recent
some vulnerability.
Lost
two of the last three.
They did, and their age profile is still slightly high for a team that plays such a high tempo brand of rugby, that they do go absent in certain games, and if you can certain moments, big moments of big games, they can kind of take the foot off the gas. So if Utah Warriors can time that, they can definitely pull off an upset here in the Coliseum. But even failing that, I think against Rugby Atlanta or New York, it'll be a great final, and one that LA aren't guaranteed of winning, but I'm kind of pulling for them just on the grounds that I think the narrative of the season, if the narrative of the season at the end is that the LA Giltinis rocked up and changed the game in the US, I'd be all for it. And I think that's already close to what's happened.
I think that's pretty much the narrative anyway, but it's just
it would be nice to bookmark
how it ends.
Yeah, because again, it would be good for Gitto. I don't know how many more seasons he's going to put in with the guys, but I think they do deserve it on balance of the season, but that doesn't necessarily mean they get it, because they have shown chinks in their armour. And they're just two very, very exciting games to wrap up the season. The regular season did wrap up last weekend. We mentioned those two games. There were a couple of others. The New England Free Jacks beat Rugby ATL actually 22-19 in a close game that Rugby ATL didn't really take that seriously.
The New England Free Jacks are not a bad team.
No,
they were unlucky to miss out in the Eastern Conference.
I think they finished third in the Eastern Conference.
It was definitely a fun conference over there. Seattle also ended the season fantastically. Massive win over Houston, 40-21.
That was right.
Our friends Old Glory got a win against the Gilgronis, 29-25.
Yes, and Twitter rejoiced. The Twitter account was good value even in victory. He's normally fun value in defeat as well.
Yeah, exactly. The season wrapped up, and now all that's left to be decided is a winner, and you can watch those games for free on the rugbynetwork.com if you're outside of the States.
You can stay up to ridiculous o'clock to do that live, or you can just watch it the day after. Really good resource. It's available there. I like our Rugby Europe one as well. We just want the South American guys to get on board and do something similar, and then we'll have all the rugby.
That's it. As far as the Currie Cup is concerned, there were a couple more games went ahead. The Griquas beat the Lions 41-31. Clearly they should have taken on the British and Irish Lions, and the Cheetahs beat Western Province for 38-21.
There you go.
So get the Cheetahs in. Get the Cheetahs in. What's going on?
Cheetahs.
A fun board where everyone's played a mad mix of games, but the Griquas are on top with the Pumas in second and the Cheetahs in fourth or in fifth. Sorry, so Western Province and Bulls are third and fourth, and the Sharks and the Lions are at the bottom.
Yeah.
Now that said, there's literally 3 points between the Pumas and the Lions.
Yeah.
It's all
Lions. It's such a back seat has it taken to the Lions tour, and COVID has affected a few games that they've been so nil. It's a mad.
It's the 97th Currie Cup we've seen in the last year.
Yeah, it's seemingly so. I'm wearied from all of these games between SAFA club teams, but it's definitely more back seat because the whole.
It'll wrap up.
I'm sure there are quite a few South African rugby fans who wouldn't even realise that it's going on right now because of the Lions tour that's going on.
Yeah, indeed. Well, it does very much soak up everything, and it'll wrap up shortly, and then they can get ready for the United Rugby Championship,
which is the intrigue really with these teams. Certainly from where we're sitting,
can they put together a competent enough showing, at least in the start of the seson, in the absence of their Springboks, who are going to be off playing the Rugby Championship, or are they going to be found out by Dragons?
Or are the Bulls waiting in the long grass for Benetton?
Perhaps
they might.
Be
plotting some revenge. Yes.
I suppose that brings us to the news of the week, where we'll wrap up the show. There's a few bits of news, nothing too major.
Not too major.
Lewis Ludlow did end up getting a suspension for 4 matches for his knee to the head of that Canadian
into the ground
man.
opponent, which is illegal in the UFC as well. So you're not allowed to do that in any real ball and field sport. You need a man in the head. And it should have been a red card, but it wasn't in the game, and so a kind of ban is probably fair.
Yeah, unfortunate for him. Then the All Blacks have named their Rugby Championship squad. TJ Perenara is the main headline to come out of that. He ousts Finlay Christie. There's been a bit of, I think Foster was kind of rebuking him in the media for
he had
playing
public.
out his...
He had public negotiations with Sydney. What was it? The Sydney
Rabbitohs.
No, it wasn't.
Sydney Rabbitohs,
no, it's the Roosters.
Oh, okay.
Sydney Roosters, who he was negotiating a potential code swapping contract with before eventually re-signing with the NZR through 2023. So it's probably just a negotiation ploy.
Yeah.
But he did it very publicly, so it's like he didn't like the look of All Black kind of like code switch.
To leave the All Blacks.
And then the other controversy is just that Christie had done really well this season, and that TJ's just back from Japan, a sabbatical in Japan, hasn't played any domestic rugby. These are the kind of minor controversies that surround before any minutes are played. We know that when TJ gets on the pitch, he's TJ tour de force.
TJ's in any squad in World Rugby. He's brilliant. It's the miracle of Aaron Smith is the only thing that stopped him from being renowned as one of the great scrum halves of our time, which he still should be.
Yeah, it's true. He has an extra, literally, it's an extra 10 kgs he has on Aaron Smith, and it is a little bit slower but more physical.
And he's not
slow.
You cannot call him slow. He's one of the quickest scrum halves.
I said slower than Aaron Smith.
No, exactly.
Which is not synonymous with slow.
No, indeed, but it's just it doesn't fly insulting the great name of TJ. He's just a phenomenal player, and he will strengthen this already very strong looking All Black team that I make favourites for the Rugby Championship, even in the face of this Bok team.
And curiously, Barrett was named as a 10 option, I think, as opposed to a back 3 option. But it's like you can name him wherever you want.
Personally, I was on the side of playing him at 15. His defensive cover is phenomenal, but I find it hard to ignore the form of Damien McKenzie as well. So yeah, they'll have to figure out that balance. I don't think the answer is benching Bowden. I think Bowden starts.
Yeah,
I think
more reason they did bench him in the last one. It may change on different tests, different courses for courses kind of thing.
They do have the luxury of talent everywhere, and that's what's
Will
so great
Jordan,
about this
Jordy
All Black
Barrett,
team.
George Bridge in there as well, Braden Enor now in there, but you have Rico and David Havili lighting it up in the centre, and all of these guys who are so good. And the notable omission was Sam Cane, who's still captain of the All Blacks, but he has not been named in the squad. And he actually gave an update where he was saying he's probably going to be out for most of the season. He's eyeballing a return to the NPC, I think, before the end of the year with the Bay of Plenty. But
interesting tidbit on the NPC is that the Western Force seem to be competing in it this year,
which is good.
Won a match against the Bay of Plenty. Why not?
Go on the Western Force. I always do like the Western Force.
They managed to hustle their way into many competitions.
They do, yeah.
They blagged their way in. I'm expecting them to rock up to the RDS one of these years.
Yeah. Oh no, we're in the United Rugby Championship now. Potentially. But just to finish that point on Sam Cane, he initially it was a pectoral injury that he had, which had him 4 weeks out. He has since they went in and scanned him and found multiple things wrong, and he needed a full shoulder reconstruction, which is more like a 6 month kind of layoff, which means he's not going to be back for this season. It's a shame,
the attritional nature of the back row. Tough one for Sam Cane, but they do have phenomenal stocks back there, and hopefully he can come back. It's not if you're looking on the bright side, it's not a bad year to have something like this done. If you can get it done right and then come back, you still have plenty of time to bed in.
It's true.
In advance of a World Cup year.
It's very true.
There's also news that Edinburgh have parted ways with Richard Cockrell. Apparently this is by mutual consent to what they say to allow him to pursue other opportunities. It's a curious one. I mean, I saw the Tier 2 Rugby blog on Twitter was suggesting that he up and go to Georgia, which would be, I'd love to see it, because Graham Rowntree got on so well, that sort of tough hard man Englishman. They seem to understand.
He could understand it. Definitely, I can see that being good. Maybe
good and bad. I'm curious to see where he ends up. It'll probably be a Premiership / Top Couture's club if you're the smart money's on that.
Yeah, I think generally it's been a pretty successful campaign with Edinburgh. Although in recent seasons they did stall, but he kind of raised their baseline from incompetent to competent, which is was important.
That's kind of what he does. Isn't it? He tightens up the if you're a raggedy bunch of fools out there, he'll get you together and get you with a functional set piece and
a little bit of grit
and a grit and a tough enough defence for a time. But it only gets
you
so far.
You see that in
typified,
quarterfinals in Europe.
Well, I was
going to
say that ultimately is where they ended up. They ended up being the team that ships about 50 points and injures a few players and scores 3.
They did.
That
was what they did.
Being,
who was it they did
Racing.
that? It was Racing, wasn't it?
Yeah,
they
took Racing out of the competition while losing by 50 points and ousting themselves.
Who did they knock out? It was 2 centres, wasn't it? It was Chavonsi and Vakatawa.
Yeah, it was a few.
He injured both of them.
Yeah,
and lost.
Yeah, well, indeed,
that's
kind of who they turned Edinburgh into. I was really appreciating what he was doing those first couple of seasons, but he's started to just wilt, and they never expanded beyond that initial play. Like he needs to work with a good backs coach and allow that backs coach to have some say, because he doesn't know.
He was all in that season that they were pretty successful was when Mata was lighting it up, and he was the key to unpick things.
And he kind of lost form a bit,
and
then that was it really. For this Edinburgh team, and it was kind of his tenure was ultimately I soured on him as Edinburgh head coach when he went to Leinster and had a bad loss against a Leinster team that we well knew were not playing that well. They weren't that good, and his response to that game was just to shrug his shoulders and go, well, we can't do anything, they've got loads of money and we've got none, so we can't compete with Leinster. I mean, it's just stupid, they have loads of money. I mean, paraphrasing, but that was the tone of his interview. And it's unimpressive,
uninspired loser talk.
And wrong as well. There were plenty of teams ended up mixing it with Leinster and beating us
Ospreys
before the season was out.
Raggedy looking Leinster side. No, we were vulnerable all season. Not that Edinburgh were there to exploit it. But despite all those words, I actually think on balance it's been a decent tenure when you look back on the whole thing.
No question.
I think he's considering where they were when he got in there. I think they are undoubtedly in a stronger place now.
Sam Allardyce of rugby.
a little bit. Get in there, tighten it up, and avoid relegation. There's no relegation. Okay, mission accomplished. Sticking with club footy, I guess we did have the Champions Cup draw last. That was yesterday as we shoot. It was Wednesday. We're shooting this on Thursday.
A confusing array of 12 team pools.
Pool A and Pool B.
Yeah, in which you just play 2 other teams in your pool and then duke it out against the other 9 teams in the pool without playing them, and then just jostle for position based on how much you win the other games by. It's a terrible system. I understand why they're doing this. They're doing this because they didn't like the 6-game pools. They felt were too long, and you ended up with rounds 5 and 6 with a number of mismatch games where there were teams who were out of the mix who didn't want to play,
playing B
teams, and they just thought that those rounds were a waste. And so what they've decided to do instead is have tight 4-game pools and then move on to a last 16,
which I'm all for.
I'm all for that, but they got to figure out this pool format because it's a mess. They can't stick with this. It's stupid. Some team is going to win both of their games or all of their games against tougher opposition and miss out
because of the margin of defeat or margin
except
of victory.
For the fact that 16 teams come through, I guess, so that's probably not going to happen now that I think of it. 8 teams from each pool of 12 come through to the last 16. And it's all sort of jostling for position. It's a bit of a goofy format. It's not quite as clean as the old pools. I understand why they're doing it, and I think, listen, as soon as we get out of the pools, you're going to have a very fascinating dynamic with a last 16 that's 2 legs. It's going to be very fun, and it's going to be a new, interesting dynamic to the competition.
High stakes games at club level. Like it's still a great competition, the Champions Cup. It's still, to my mind, the superior club competition in the world in terms of just the dynamic.
This tinkering isn't helping.
Tinkering doesn't help, as we learned from Super Rugby. The tinkering and expanding and changing just kind of tends to dwindle the intrigue.
It does.
But we'll see how this plays out, because COVID has kind of forced their hand to these decisions, as well as that, like what you were citing with the concerns about round 5 and 6 in the pools. But I do think they haven't quite landed on the right thing. I think a simpler thing is just four teams in a pool and just have at it, or 3 teams in a pool and have at it.
Something like that. Exactly. They're only trying to eliminate 8 from the reckoning. Going into the last 16. About it,
it's like, hooray, from Leinster point of view, Montpellier and Bath.
I mean, again, it really does feel like we play the same 4 or 5
play Montpellier
teams
as often as we play Dragons these days.
Get Montpellier a lot, and then there's like a rotation of English teams. There's Bath, Wasps, and Northampton on the rotation. But that's what we get. Anyway,
two fine away trips from the point of view. Bath and Montpellier, lovely
Challenge
places.
Cup winners in Montpellier who Could on paper be no mugs?
Oh, stop on paper. On paper is when I'm sick of these things. I think it's positive for all the reasons. Like, I think our fans will, all the fans will be only dying for an excuse to get out of the country and go and see a bit of rugby. And Montpellier, bring it on. Bath, bring it on. Both lovely locations.
I'd take getting out to the RDS.
But the rugby, I'd take that too. Same. Yeah. But from the rugby brain part of me, I'm pretty bored at looking at Leinster Montpellier on paper. I'm sick of it. Ooh, this could be a good game.
To our hour-long preview of that one.
Yeah, no. But that's just my selfish head thing. I was joking last week about playing Montpellier, and then sure enough, there they are again.
Of course, your favourites.
Yeah.
Listen, that about does us for news, and about does us for the show.
That's right.
I think a little shorter one this week, but not too short. I don't
not
think
too short.
I don't know how long
it's a relative term.
It is. But listen, thanks a million for all of you guys for tuning in. This was the 100th. It's been great to bring you 100, and we're looking forward to the next 100. Be sure to like and subscribe and tune in next week, and comment down below as well. We'd love to hear your chat. It's always good. There's been some great conversations going on in the chat that we've been looking at and enjoying, so keep that up.
Absolutely.
And, listen, I think we'll wrap it up there.
Yeah, nothing else to say except see you next time, folks. Bye.
Bye.
Snatchy low one. Hey.
Oh, you nailed it. Slightly moved it. God, that is a weak throw. Catch it flush and don't take it. Whoa! Why would you do that?
Didn't think I'd catch it flush.